Did you know that the map of the Earth changed forever last year?
The volume of the iceberg is said to be twice as large as Lake Erie.
A giant section of ice shelf broke free in Antarctica in 2017. Satellites were used to keep an eye on this incident, a drastic result of climate change. And geospatial technology can help monitor the effects of climate change, improve natural resource management, and prevent threats to biodiversity. Data makes the invisible visible.
Turks and Caicos really starting to get slammed from this, and we're going to continue to see that move toward the west-northwest at about 16 miles per hour.
Whether it's education and welfare, or food security, or even life, monitoring any goal becomes easy with geo-information. Artificial intelligence provides real-time resource allocation through satellite mapping and data analysis. Agriculture productivity is increased from imaging with automated drones and from satellites. Precision agriculture tools can go a long way in increasing agricultural produce and mitigating hunger. 8 billion mobile devices with smartphone cameras are being used to diagnose heart, eye, and blood disorders. The Internet of Things and sensors feeding into the AI of everything are predicting sanitation and consumption patterns for improved safe water and sanitation. New hybrid manufacturing incorporating AI, IoT sensors, and 4D printing are reshaping industries and yielding exponential innovation unprecedented in world history. Geospatial data, if analyzed and modeled properly, can be visualized as a dynamic, informative map. Technology touches every aspect of our life and the world's need for sustainable development. Join us as we explore how. Did you know that the map of the Earth changed forever last year?
The volume of the iceberg is said to be twice as large as Lake Erie.
A giant section of ice shelf broke free in Antarctica in 2017. Satellites were used to keep an eye on this incident, a drastic result of climate change. And geospatial technology can help monitor the effects of climate change, improve natural resource management, and prevent threats to biodiversity. They have the unique ability to meet the needs of humanitarian actors. Images are updated regularly, making it possible to follow the evolution of natural disasters and their impact on affected populations in real time. There is a strong focus on data, analytics, and geospatial technologies now more than ever to achieve development outcomes. This data makes the invisible visible.
Turks and Caicos really starting to get slammed from this, and we're going to continue to see that move toward the west-northwest at about 16 miles per hour.
Whether it's education and welfare, or food security, or even life, monitoring any goal becomes easy with geo-information. Artificial intelligence provides real-time resource allocation through satellite mapping and data analysis. agriculture productivity is increased from imaging with automated drones and from satellites. Precision agriculture tools can go a long way in increasing agricultural produce and mitigating hunger. 8 billion mobile devices with smartphone cameras are being used to diagnose heart, eye and blood disorders. The Internet of Things and sensors feeding into the AI of everything are predicting sanitation and consumption patterns for improved safe water and sanitation. New hybrid manufacturing incorporating AI, IoT sensors and 4D printing are reshaping industries and yielding exponential innovation unprecedented in world history. Geospatial data, if analyzed and modeled properly, can be visualized as a dynamic, informative map. Technology touches every aspect of our life and the world's need for sustainable development. Join us as we explore how.
Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to the Geo4 SDGs conference themed Geo Knowledge Conduit to SDGs Success. We'll be beginning with the plenary session on Geo4 SDGs addressing Agenda 2030. The unprecedented power of where, that is the location element, lies at the core of the SDGs, and geoinformation makes the invisible visible. It helps in analyzing the past, make observations about the present, predict the future to improve people's life, and protect the planet. The United Nations has also corroborated the significance of leveraging geospatial data for policy making, programming, and project operations to realize the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the 169 associated targets. The session will discuss the increasing role of geospatial information to address the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I now request Doreen Burmanier, Chair of the Executive Board, Cadastre, Land Registry and Mapping Agency, the Netherlands, to moderate the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction. That need no more explanation. The one-liner of the UN GGIM in this matter is everything happens somewhere. So now our panel is happening now and today. So good morning, everybody. I'm glad you're here after a splendid evening with lovely music. I think a lot of us are all most impressed by the lovely music and the lovely evening, and maybe they have to start up and will join us later. May I introduce my panelists to you? And the first one is Mrs. Stefan Swijnvest, Director of the United Nations Statistic Division, the founder of the United Nations GGIM Division. Stefan, will you join me on the floor? The second one is Mrs. Virginia Burkett, Chief Scientist about Climate and Land Use Change in the United States. Virginia, welcome to the stage. And the third one is Prashant Shukla, Director General of Natural Resources of Canada. I'm glad you're here. And last but definitely not least, very honored to have here,
Congratulations.
High Commissioner
Last night.
of Ghana. Please join us at the stage. Thank you very much. And may I ask a warm welcome to them.
I'm here on this particular panel. I have nothing to show.
Why can't you sit down in these chairs? I would like to have you.
Hello there.
Hi. Nice to be pleasure to meet you.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Hello. Okay.
So, again, a warm welcome to my panelists. And the format is that we have 10 minutes for every speaker, every panelist to introduce the topic, and it's all about, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals and the agenda in 2030, and it sounds far, far away, but it's only 12 years from now. And maybe we can focus on two issues. Is it predictable what we do have as an agenda for 2030? Nowadays, 12 years seems a very long period, and doesn't change too much to predict an agenda for 2030, but more important, what's on this, at this moment, what's on that agenda? Stefan, may I ask you to start with your presentation, please?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Doreen, for giving me the floor first. Also, I need to take this moment to thank the organizers for a fabulous evening. I'm still fully inspired by this wonderful Indian hospitality, and it's a little bit hard to focus on work this morning, but let me try to be the first one to lead us back. I would like to set the frame, perhaps, for the discussion. Talking a little bit about the SDGs. I mean, everybody knows most of it, but I mean, just frame it back. The development agenda, these are the 17 goals and the 169 targets that were adopted in 2015 by the UN General Assembly. You see all the various areas that are covered by the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think this is a historical agreement for the world to march in the same direction when it comes to development, sustainable development. Now here we have a little pyramid, and let me lead you from the top to the bottom. We have the 17 goals on the top, and then we have the 169 targets that specify a little bit more concretely what we really want to achieve. Those were the policy frames, and then in the next line underneath we have 232 global indicators. Actually, the number is increasing still. This was worked out by an interagency and expert group at the United Nations under the Statistical Commission that formulated these 230 indicators that are, of course, directly linked to the 169 targets. We had hoped to keep it close to that 169 number, but I mean, some of the targets are multiple targets, so you need multiple indicators. But fundamentally, you can see there is basically one indicator per target. Now, this is all the global level. If you go one floor down, then you see that the implementation has to happen at national level. And there are many countries now where we have SDG committees where this is taken on. And then the bottom level is really the one that interests us, because this is about monitoring and reviewing. And there we need different form of informations to construct those indicators. And I jump to this next triangle. You will see many triangles here. We love triangles in our representations. And here, what I want to explain is we need sustainable data for sustainable development. This is this SD4SD in the middle. And my starting point is, of course, official statistics, but that is not sufficient. We also need, of course, geospatial information, and I will talk a lot about that link between statistics and geospatial information, but that's not even the complete picture. We have another corner of this triangle called big data, which is not very well defined what it actually is, but we all have a notion of it, and I will talk a little bit about it. But I think we need all of those information elements to support the Sustainable Development Agenda at the various levels, at the national and at the global level. Okay, let me reflect a little bit more on data and what kind of data are needed. I already talked about, if you look at that red box where it says it needs to include all parts of the statistical system and all new data sources. So all parts of the statistical system means that there is already an integration challenge in the areas of statistics where I come from to bring environmental, economic, and demographic and social statistics together. But that's only the very first step. Then we have to bring in new data sources, geospatial information and big data, to integrate that with these more traditional official statistics sources. Then if you move to the green box, what type of data we need data that are satisfying quality levels. Data needs to be accessible, it needs to be timely and reliable, and it needs to be disaggregated. Disaggregated is a big theme under the development agenda, because it's not only data for nations that count and that we can monitor something in New York at the UN level. The fundamental principle of the agenda is leave nobody behind, focusing on the individual, make lives better for everybody on this planet, and that translates into the statistical concept of disaggregated data. We need to know more specifically, and geographical disaggregation is one big topic, because that allows you to zoom in at the subnational level all the way almost to the household unit. And of course, the other requirement, we need data on a wide range of topics, new topics, governance data, measurement of human rights, measurement of disaster management. These are not so classical areas like health and education, for instance. So all of this has to play together. So the challenge for nations now is to create an interoperable system, an integrated system with all these data pillars and elements, which I would loosely call the national information system, which has to underpin the Sustainable Development Agenda. So here we have the agenda. Let me show you two slides about the integration of statistics and geospatial information. We have the agenda, and then on the left-hand side you have the usual data layers as we know them from geospatial information systems with the various data sets. But now we look a little bit more in detail. Let me change the right-hand side and show you there the various data sets that come from the three pillars of the agenda, namely the environment, the social sphere, and the economics. And in all of those we have disaggregations and different layers, and now these are all the layers of the statistical side on the right-hand side and the geospatial side on the left-hand side that we have to construct and build together. How do we do that? Now, I can barely read that from here. I'm pleased it looks better on the big screen. We have created a so-called spatial statistical framework. And this was adopted by both communities, the statistical community and the geospatial information management community. And this is the principles around which the two communities have to work together. And if you look from the bottom to the top, it starts with the creation of data, and then on the top, making the data available. And all of these 5 layers are placeholders for guiding principles and standards and more specific recommendations in these 5 areas. The use of fundamental geospatial infrastructure and geocoding, it's very important. We have to have a data management environment where the data are stored in a way that they can be retrieved for the various purposes. We need to agree on common geographies for the dissemination of statistics, and common geographies is not trivial because, I mean, the statisticians may be thinking in terms of enumeration zones for their census. The environmentalists may be thinking of ecosystems which they use as a basis of measurement. And then you may have administrative units for which you have data, and so, I mean, we need to agree on fundamental principles where we can put all these various data systems together, interoperability, and then on the top of the pyramid, accessibility and usability of geospatially enabled statistics. I mean, these are all big words. There is an interesting document behind this. It would be on our website if you want to dive a little bit deeper. But this is really the framework, the blueprint for the two professional communities to work together. I have another slide, which is a project that we are actually conducting at this moment to create a so-called federated information systems for the SDGs. If I can lead you through this by starting in the middle of the slide at the bottom. We have all of these various data sources, administrative records, statistical surveys, census, geospatial information, and other sources. This is what we want to build together into a national statistical or national information system. Then we have on the right-hand side, it becomes a little bit more complicated because international agencies are also working with us, and their responsibility is to make the data comparable, because the data are not only used at the national level, they have to be translated into the international level. Ideally, directly, if the country uses the standards, then the data can be taken over into an international database immediately. If they are not standard compliant, then maybe modification of national data are needed before they are integrated into an international database to preserve comparability. Then on top, the part is the global database, because my office has the task to collect the data for all countries and publish an annual report at the global level. And so we are trying to build an architecture here with a number of pilot countries where what you obviously want is that the data from the very bottom of this slide to the very top to New York flow through in a most efficient manner. And as I said, we are currently conducting a research project with the support of ESRI and a number of pilot countries. And I'm actually looking forward to reporting on that at some later point in more detail and see how this is applicable to other countries too. So if you have such a system of fully integrated statistical and geospatial information, then the following thing happens. This is a slide that we had, this is a graph that we had in our regular publication. It's a very statistical representation of things. This is about poverty and how the poverty incidence in the various regions of the world, and you have these bar graphs, and if you now geospatially enable it, the picture looks like this. So then we have poverty incidence, in the various countries, and this is then this is what we have at the very global level. I think that doesn't impress you. This is a very particular map of all the countries in the world. But what I'm talking about, of course, is also geospatial enabled information at the country level. And then you get pictures like this. This is an example of one of the indicators, forest areas and France. So this is an example how geospatial information is integrated with statistics at the national level. And do I have, oh yeah, I have two more slides. This is the report that we have to present, my office has to present. So I have a dual task. I have to collect the data and produce a report at the global level, but we also have a capacity building responsibility at the country level to help each country to build national databases and national data hubs for the SDGs. But at the end of the day, this is what we produce once a year. This was in June 2017, the Global Sustainable Development Goals that goes to the General Assembly, reporting on how the world is doing. And so my final key messages are the following. The UN Sustainable Development Agenda is a unique opportunity to build strong national integrated information systems, because the policy makers and everybody is paying attention to this, citizen, even industry, and everybody is encouraged to and excited to make a contribution. So it is a unique opportunity. As you can see, geospatial information plays a critical role, both at the global, even more at the national level, as an integrator also of different information systems. And private-public partnerships are essential at all stages of the data management road, data production, because the private sector has sometimes data, big data, there are lots of data in the private sector. Data management, of course, the private sector is very experienced in data management and can lend a very helping hand to the public sector in doing that. And also data use, because the private sector is also a user of the information that is provided and comes out of this integration of various data sources. So I think I went a little bit over time, but I stop here. And then I'm happy to take questions in the question round. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. And a huge challenge to fulfill the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and more than 160 targets. Maybe we can discuss later on what the specific role of the industry should be in this case.
Yeah.
But before that, I would like to give the floor to Virginia.
Okay.
And you are going to tell us something more specified about disaster management and data. So it's more or less a pop star introduction.
I love it. Oh, okay. Can you hear me fine? All right. I was contacted by Sanjay to come to this wonderful meeting that has inspired me tremendously. And I thought I would incorporate into my talk just a few slides first about disaster risk reduction and the relation of geodata, not just to the SDGs, but to the Sendai framework, which is intimately linked with the success of the Sustainable Development Goals and our achievement of them. And from the strategic framework for the UNGGIM report on disaster risk management concludes that geospatial information is very important and that the environmental risk and impacts of disasters are tremendously dependent upon geospatial information and services. And earlier this week, I talked a little bit about how we use geospatial information to reduce the risk of exposure and the impacts deformation of the land surface, and we have other tools where we can monitor with the thermal infrared sensor. We can look at the temperature over the volcanoes, and so we do all volcano alerts globally for countries around the world. Landslides are another example of how spatial data is very important in situational awareness. I love what one fellow said yesterday morning about every citizen should have access to information that gave situational awareness that help them respond to things like disasters. After Hurricane Maria made landfall in Puerto Rico last year, we went in very quickly and assessed the landslides associated with that hurricane. And you can see the intensity of landslides in Puerto Rico after that hurricane. That knowledge, that spatial data, helped inform both the disaster immediate recovery and the long-term recovery as they plan to rebuild roads and infrastructure in Puerto Rico. We use geospatial data to fight fires. I'm sure other countries do as well. We use satellite remote sensing and ground-based data to map the perimeter of fires daily for our National Fire Interagency Fire Center. In some cases, we do hourly reports to protect firefighters and communities at risk. Another type of geospatial data support we provide is called our tsunami hazard assessments. And all of this kind of goes under this umbrella of science applications for risk reduction. We call it SAFER. And for 73 U.S. Pacific Coast communities, we've integrated 3 different layers: land use, population density and distribution, and elevation data in a geospatial format, where we have helped communities map the best way to get kids out of schools and up away from tsunami zones in the event of a tsunami and a warning goes out. We not only produce the maps, we provide the training for emergency managers. So we don't just throw it over the transom and expect people to assimilate the information. We train people, and we spend a lot of time in that transfer of knowledge. Here's another one here for part of Washington's coast, where we use the data not just to map the evacuation routes for pedestrians to get away from a tsunami, but also we help them map where the best places to build tsunami shelters would be, considering elevation and population and so forth. So let me switch now to focus more on the SDGs directly. And here I'm going to put on my hat. And with Barbara Ryan's permission, I'm going to put on my delegate, I'm the alternate delegate to the GEO, which is a member organization of 105 countries and about 130 observing organizations around the world that have goals and objectives, many of which complement the SDGs. And this whole SDG concept has become a priority engagement area of the group on Earth observations that will help support all of the goals. In collaboration with Stefan's group, and Doreen is a member of the UNGGIM leadership team, GEO is advocating that Earth observations and geospatial data are used in measuring and monitoring SDGs, and our goal is to try to make that easier and to support that effort. All of the UN goals, all 17 goals, have some need for geospatial data for population distribution all the way across, ending with hazards there on the right. And in Article 76 of the General Assembly resolution from 2015 for the plan, says we will promote transparent and accountable scaling up of public-private cooperation to exploit the contribution to be made by a wide range of data, including Earth observations and geospatial information. So, subsequent to that, GEO established an initiative. So all the countries came together and agreed on these. We have flagships, we have initiatives, and that's kind of the second level of the effort. So this is a new effort within GEO, and these are the three goals that we have that will support achievement and monitoring of the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm going to focus in the end here on just one of the 17 goals, SDG 2, Zero Hunger. It is informed by crop monitors. Here is the one of the UN measures there to that a target for helping to achieve the zero hunger goal. And here's one of the products here from GEO. This is a flagship effort of GEO. It's called GeoGlam, the Global Agricultural Monitoring Program, wherein the countries team up with their geospatial data to send out alerts and crop condition, water availability, that sort of information to countries around the world. And by producing and disseminating this relevant, timely, and accurate information on agricultural production, GeoGlam, the GEO's Global Land Agricultural Monitoring Program, fully contributes to SDG Indicator 2.C that I showed earlier. And finally, another activity, this is switching back more to home for me, wherein we're linked with GeoGlam, and part of the delivery of the information includes our program that we lead in collaboration with the USAID Office of Food for Peace called FuseNet. It's called the Famine Early Warning System. And many of you are old enough to remember in 1984 the terrible photos on the news of the people dying in Ethiopia and Somalia. And American policymakers and our USAID, and I'm sure people in other countries too, vowed never to let this happen again. And so USAID came to the USGS because we have a satellite, Landsat. And they said, can you help us with your satellite look at crop condition or moisture availability and help us anticipate this sort of event into the future? So the first monitoring with Landsat that we did for, and some other remote sensing instruments, MODIS and some others, we started developing these vegetation indices for the African Sahel in 1987. And here, so many years later, decades later, we have really advanced this sort of tool. We work closely with NOAA, NASA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, the University of California at Santa Barbara, and the University of Maryland to assess continually crop condition and the potential for food insecurity in the nations that are shown here. We actually have people on the ground. The University of California at Santa Barbara pays for folks through USAID, through USGS, to have people located in the brown countries that are shown on this graphic here. And then in the other countries, we primarily rely just on our remote sensing data. And why would we need to have people in the field? Because food security is not just dependent upon the condition of the crops. It's dependent upon markets. It's dependent upon transportation. It's dependent upon the ability of people, the nutrition status of people to actually consume the food and still be able to survive a potential crisis. So these are the sorts of information that go into the FuseNet program. It didn't start like this in 1987, but decades later, here we have a very sophisticated assessment of food security in a decision support tool that is used by USAID that distributes $2 billion a year internationally in aid. So this is that's why they pay us to do this for them. Here's to end with a couple of graphics just to show. I mentioned the drought in 1984 that caused such a widespread loss of life. And did you know that in 2015 we had a worse drought that was experienced in Ethiopia? But the difference here is that an alert went out. And we started in April of 2015, started doing briefings for the international aid community on the potential disaster that we saw coming with the failure of rainfall in early 2015, which portends a hunger crisis in 2016. And so we started producing these monthly reports, and ultimately we started doing the long-term projections. And we use this FAO classification of the situation of potential food crisis or food insecurity in Ethiopia through time. And in the end, we use satellite remote sensing, climate forecasting, and surface modeling capabilities to project livelihood impacts many months in advance. In December of 2015, the government of Ethiopia issued a worldwide appeal for $1.4 billion in emergency aid to reach the 10 million people that they thought would be impacted. And do you know, the U.S. provided 55% of that response. The rest of the world came to the aid as well. The other countries contributed, and they were able to survive this potential catastrophe. So though the Ethiopian drought in 2015 was worse than the one in 1984, a hunger crisis was averted. So that's just one of the 17 goals and a couple of examples of how geospatial data, science applications, and decision support can inform the achievement of these goals that Stefan laid out so nicely. And this report was just produced by the Group on Earth Observations that gives more examples. It's on the GEO website if you'd like to have it. And initially, GEO was focusing, you notice the hunger's not on here. You can imagine the richness of the data for these focal areas: clean water and sanitation, sustainable communities, life below water, and life on land. And finally, a climate. I'm an author of 4 IPCC reports. This is my first exposure to this forum, and the linkages and the bridges that need to be built so that we can inform climate adaptation and mitigation with geospatial data is just so evident to me, and I'm so thankful that I was able to come and be inspired by all the tools and this private sector growth and innovation that will help us achieve these goals. So with that, Doreen, thank you very much. This is just an example of a glacier in Banff National Park. I took on pleasure vacation last summer, and you know, in Glacier National Park in America, Glacier National Park, we won't have any glaciers in 20 years. So the rate of change, as an IPC scientist, I can say we're very conservative, and in many cases I think we underestimated the rate of change that is now playing out on the landscape. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Virginia. I think you're an excellent example of what we call in the Netherlands the golden triangle between science, government, and industry, and that we need each other to understand the world and the solutions we have to make together. So thank you for that. Before we continue, I do have 2 questions in the audience, because for the people here on stage, Sustainable Development Goals are almost daily stuff. It's our reference of our work, it's our common language, but I realize that it maybe will not for everyone in the room. So who before this morning was convenient with SDGs, the Business Sustainable Development Goals? Who of the audience were already involved in one way or the other? Okay. So may I invite you, after all the panelists have done their presentations, don't hesitate to ask more basic things about Sustainable Development Goals. We should be pleased to answer that questions. And the second question, and you don't have to answer to that, but I realized sitting over there that you are in front of 3 award winners of yesterday evening. 3. So enjoy that. And that's the introduction to our third panelist, because he was also an award winner. Prashant, may I give the floor to you?
Good morning. I want to pick up on Doreen's last point, which was about asking the question of how many of you were involved in the I have this habit of setting off equipment. That's why my staff don't let me do telemetry and tracking control whenever we're doing some work on our satellites. So if I start giving feedback, let me know. Pick up on the point of how many of you were involved in Sustainable Development Goals before. In a sense, I wasn't really involved in the formal process around Sustainable Development Goals or working on climate change. As public servants, we are often beholden to the political direction of the day. And the case in Canada was that we had very specific direction to look at the issue of sustainable resource development, which was a different policy focus than, say, mitigating and adapting to climate change and all of the attendant risks and various impacts on human society that result. So we have been touching the issue of sustainable development or climate change or adapting or mitigating the impacts of climate change in what I would consider to be a non-direct way. However, we are starting on this process much more formally and much more aggressively. On October 24th, 2017, our Prime Minister did make a very direct commitment to contributing to Sustainable Development Goals and measuring them in very substantive ways. The Government of Canada is starting to mobilize much more strongly, and in the coming months, you will be hearing about how the Government of Canada is actually going to position itself within its specific interests to move forward on the Sustainable Goal agenda. Now, what we're in the fortunate position of having is a fair bit of work in combining geospatial and statistical data. Geospatial data, and by that in the Government of Canada, we mean every data point that can be referenced to the Earth, whether it's X, Y, or Z axes. So it includes statistical data, it includes non-statistical data that is non-geographic, and it also includes geographic data. So our definition is a fairly wide swath, and it cuts across a number of departments that have got fairly good capabilities. So some examples that you see up there are the use of geospatial data for election planning, and there are certain linkages back to the sustainable goals with respect to governance and with respect to transparency. You've got issues around weather, climate change, mitigation, adaptation, resiliency, and that ties into the Sendai framework, which Virginia talked about. And we are working on that, and Canada did host a major forum in 2017 in Montreal related to the Sendai framework. We're continuing to work on things like clean water, and let's be frank, Canada has its own issues. And even though we have some of the world's largest freshwater, clean water deposits, and Virginia pointed to Banff National Park and our receding glaciers, we have specific issues with respect to clean water on Indigenous reserves, because some of the water is not drinkable. It's not potable. And we have our own issues that we have to achieve with respect to sustainable development and inclusive economies and inclusive growth. What are the elements of expertise that we have in the Canada Centre for Mapping and Earth Observation? I think Sanjay and company have been very kind in referring to me as a Director General of Natural Resources Canada. I'm not the only Director General in Natural Resources Canada. However, I'm the only Director General of the Canada Centre for Mapping and Earth Observation, which is one component of Natural Resources Canada. And we have some core geospatial information or foundational information that we're contributing to the United Nations and to Stefan's process around those foundational layers. So in that sense, we're doing our part. And I'm kind of happy to say, whether it was design or whether it was serendipity or whether I think it goes back to the fact that this geospatial community is not a new community, but has been around for over 100 years or 200 years because of our cartographic roots, that we have very similar approaches to what is foundational data. And when you look at countries like India, you look at countries like the UK, you look at any of the Commonwealth countries, for example, we have a very common base. And our common base really does emanate from the old Ordnance Survey dating back hundreds of years, and the British Army that had its impact in a number of the Commonwealth countries and established those foundational base layers. So there's a commonality that we have, and we have this foundation to really work upon. We're also looking at thematic data. And so Canada in 1906 established its Atlas of Canada, and it's in my legislation, just like it is in Statistics Canada's legislation, that every 5 years I have to procure an Atlas of Canada. And what we do is we integrate the Statistics Canada data into the Atlas of Canada and actually do something that's kind of neat, which I think for sustainable development goals is going to be pretty profound. It allows us to see the change that's happening, because maps and visualizations allow us to see the change as opposed to really looking at the change or thinking about the change in statistical or econometric analyses. I think that's the real pervasive and powerful thing about the SDGs. And one of the things that this global geospatial community has as an opportunity before it is the focus that we need to put on being able to let people see the change that's happening on the planet. And to that extent, our innovation component in the Canada Centre for Remote Sensing, which is one division, is that we are bringing radar imagery, we are bringing multispectral imagery, in addition to the optical imagery, and tying it to the various types of data sources that come from statistical and non-statistical but non-geographic types of data sources. We are working with Stats Canada to look at things like agricultural production using RadarSat, just as the USGS has used Landsat. And I think the Landsat working group that met in Inuvik last year also talked about some of the food security issues as well as the new applications around Landsat. And there's this wonderful global group that does work on Landsat. And if some of you aren't part of that group, I would urge you to think about how it is you can come together in part of that global community. It would be interesting to see other communities come together around different types of sensor capabilities. I think the US has shown some absolutely spectacular leadership on the Landsat side, and maybe some of us that have some capabilities on the radar side should be thinking about doing similar types of things. And in that sense, it really brings about the kind of innovation that we can bring to bear as this geospatial community. as some of our statistical colleagues really begin to ponder the deepening of the use of what can be seen as opposed to what can be calculated, I think we have a tremendous opportunity to show and take the innovations that we saw up on the screen yesterday to think about how it is we can put them into action in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. What's really powerful here on the Sustainable Development Goals is that they have been crafted in such a way that national interest can be nicely moved in under the banner of achieving Sustainable Development Goals. So I think the UN has really done a bang-up job in terms of articulating the scope and the pace, as well as the breadth of how nation states can contribute to measuring progress towards SDGs. And how are we actually driving the geo-enabling of SDGs? Well, one of our big initiatives that we've had over the last 3 years is the Federal Geospatial Platform. It's basically an enterprise-wide portal, and it's basically the federal spatial data infrastructure. So one of the divisions that I have reporting to me is the Canadian Geospatial Data Infrastructure Division, which is responsible for SDIs. It's interesting that all of the provinces and the territories signed on to SDI work, and that we're doing an Arctic spatial data infrastructure with the 8 Arctic countries in the Arctic and around the Arctic, but the hardest work was at home within the federal family. But over the last 3 years, we've been able to bring over 22 different departments together. We've liberated data, and we only thought we'd get about 100 multi-layered data sets over the course of a 3-year project. And we've actually now got over 1,000 data layers. Those 1,000 data layers sit on top of those foundational data and now provide us with a new approach to conceiving of the Atlas of Canada. So how it is we bring together these various data layers, how it is that individual departments will be able to develop and synthesize analyses, not just in terms of visualization, but also in terms of deep analytics, because now we have over 100 trillion combinations and permutations of data that can be done. So in that process, we really enabled some big data thinking and big data and deep analytics capabilities. And with Stats Canada, we're actually starting to deepen and broaden the use of things like crop forecasting, where we used satellite imagery we currently use satellite imagery to do crop forecasting. We're looking at how it is we can use it to monitor infrastructure stock in the country. We're looking at national accounts and the calculation of national accounts using satellite imagery for other forms of vegetation, other forms of forestry, uses around greenhouse gas emissions. So the possibilities and the opportunities are endless. And I won't go into the details because I think Virginia did a really nice job in terms of how the USGS is focusing on some of those components. And because we have such a strong continental partnership, a lot of the work that's done in the USGS, well, I'll be honest with you, we sort of draft in behind them sometimes. Sometimes we're lucky enough to be out ahead of them, but you know, it's wonderful having a continental partner like the USGS where we can draw on some lessons learned. So, you know, we've heard a lot about the kinds of things that we could do in terms of big data, in terms of other types of work. I would strongly urge us that the international collaboration that we see at fora like these has got to continue, and that the collaboration has got to cut across the public and the private sector. In Canada, we're a small country in the sense that we have 33 million people, but we have the longest coastline in the world, coastlines. We have the second largest landmass, and over 80% of our population lives within 100 miles of the Canada-US border. So close to 90% of our country is unmonitored, and we need to work with the private sector to make sure that we can effectively monitor it, because we can't do it all in the Canada Centre for Mapping and Earth Observation, especially given the spread of all of the SDGs across the various components where we need to measure. So the collaboration is absolutely key, and I think that fora like this are important to bring together collaborative components in geospatial communities as well as statistical communities, deep analytics communities, and technology partners that traditionally have not been in our radar. So with that, I'll leave it and go from there.
Thank you very much, Prashant, for the overview you gave about Canada, and especially the combination and the responsibility you mentioned from geospatial data infrastructure combined with the Sustainable Development Goals is maybe worth talking and discussing a little bit further. So for those who came in a little bit later, welcome. We are talking about the 2030 agenda, and then specially focused on the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals defined by the United Nations and accepted worldwide, and we are trying to give an overview what the influence of the Sustainable Development Goals is for the different areas we're working in. And it's an honor for me to introduce our last panelist, Michael Okwai, High Commissioner of Ghana. So may I give you the floor, please?
Very much for the lovely rock music introduction. I want to start by saying, Madam Chair and Moderator, fellow panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I want to start by saying a big thank you. Don't worry, we can have some more rock music, no problem. The Geospatial World Forum for inviting Africa to this very illustrious organization and presentation. And as we can all see, the UN, countries like Canada, United States, and so on, have been doing a lot of work and have moved onto a certain level. But Africa would want to be part of this. And we can see the foresight in you inviting us here to be part of this. It therefore gives me immense pleasure to be here today. And the theme of the conference is apt, as it seeks to focus on enabling the fourth industrial revolution in Africa. Technologies are emerging and affecting our lives in ways that indicate that we are beginning the fourth industrial revolution, a new era that builds and extends the impact of digitization in new and unanticipated ways. The first industrial revolution saw the shift from human reliance on animals, human effort, biomass, and by that, we're using things like cow dung, etc., as primary sources of energy, to the use of fossil fuels and the mechanical power this enabled. Then the second industrial revolution saw major breakthroughs in the form of electricity, wireless and wired communication, and new forms of power generation in terms of thermal, nuclear, renewable energy, etc. The third industrial revolution began with the development of digital systems, communication, and rapid advances in computing power, which enabled new ways of generating, processing, and sharing information, i.e., the IT computer age. The fourth industrial revolution foresees the advent of systems involving new capabilities for people and machines, representing new ways in which technology becomes embedded within societies and even our human bodies. For example, as we know with nanotechnology, where computer chips are being put in human beings now, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and as you've all come to hear, the very big word here, big data. In many ways, in many parts of the world, the impact of the second and third industrial revolution is yet to be experienced. And this is particularly so with regard to Ghana and Africa. Now, as the United Nations pointed out in 2013, more people in the world have access to a mobile phone than to basic sanitation. More people have access to a mobile phone than to be able to predict food security, as was just shown in the case of Ethiopia, where help was needed to avert a disaster in terms of famine. The fourth industrial revolution is beginning to emerge at the same time that the third digital revolution is spreading and maturing in countries in Africa. The complexity of these technologies and their emergent natures makes many aspects of the fourth industrial revolution feel unfamiliar to us. All industrial revolutions are ultimately driven by the individual and collective choices of people. In reality, it is a reflection of our desires and choices. And at the heart of discussions around emerging technologies, there is a critical question. What do we want these technologies to develop and deliver for us? We stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another in its scale, scope, and complexity. This transformation will be unlike anything mankind has ever experienced before. The fourth industrial revolution is not just an extension of the third, but different in speed, scope, and impact. When compared with previous revolutions, it is evolving at an exponential rather than linear pace. It is disrupting almost every industry in every country, and the impact of these changes is heralding the transformation of entire systems of production, management, and government and governance. In terms of management, we're talking about technology whereby there's a provision of 24/7 visibility in the process. So, for example, monitoring patients in terms of data for the predictive analysis in areas like agriculture, which was ably shown here, to be able to look at the weather, to be able to predict market conditions, etc. And in terms of governance, we're looking at the use of technology to reach out to the citizens. When it comes to production, we're looking at automation in terms of hazardous tasks, where machines and all the various learning processes, predictive analysis, will be used to go into areas that either humans cannot get to or too dangerous to get to. Geospatial technologies, therefore, are an essential element of the fourth industrial revolution, as it is about location-based data. The challenges and opportunities, like the revolutions that preceded it, the fourth industrial revolution has the potential to raise global income levels and improve the quality of life for populations around the world. And we saw that aptly shown in the presentation about Canada. I am convinced, therefore, that in future, talent, more than just capital, will make the difference in success and failure. For example, if we look at the innovations like Facebook, Google, etc., funds are being channeled into ideas which would lead to making sure that these goals, whether sustainable development goals or millennium development goals, as we have in Ghana, are achieved. Some of these, for example, are very visible in the Tea Hub, which we've seen in Hyderabad, and I think such a thing in Ghana is needed now so that we'll be able to catch up in this fourth revolution. Inequality represents the greatest concern associated with the fourth industrial revolution, and the largest beneficiaries of innovation tend to be the providers of intellectual and physical capital, i.e., the innovators, shareholders, and investors, which explains the rising gap in wealth between those dependent on capital versus labor. Technology, therefore, is one of the main reasons why incomes have stagnated or even decreased for a majority of the population in high-income countries. The demand for highly skilled workers has increased, while the demand for workers with less education and lower skills has decreased. This underscores why so many workers are disillusioned and are fearful for their own incomes and those of their children, and this will continue to stagnate. It also explains why middle classes around the world are increasingly experiencing a sense of dissatisfaction and unfairness. The impact on business across all industries, as we can see, there is a clear evidence that the technologies that underpin the fourth industrial revolution are having a major impact on businesses. The main effects of the fourth industrial revolution has businesses, which include customer services. This would have on various things like product enhancement, collaborate innovation, organizational forms, and new business models. As we can see, and this is clear all over the world, of course, including Africa, we can see what geospatial aggregation of big data has had in terms of Uber on taxis. We see what Airbnb has had in terms of hotels and accommodation. And most recently, for those of you who are aware of it, Dr. Practo. Dr. Practo is where patients can choose suitable doctor based either on the qualifications of the doctor. You go to the app, you can get the time you want to see him, his location, even his charges, and so on and so forth. The impact on government, therefore, as the physical, digital, and biological worlds converge, new technologies and platforms will enable citizens to engage with governments. Governments will gain new technological powers to increase their control over the citizens. However, governments will continually face pressure to change their current approach to public engagement and policy making, as their central role of conducting policy diminishes, new sources of competition emerge. Governments would have to learn how to use big data to even feed their people. Governments in Africa would have to learn how to use big data to even get water for their people. Governments will have to learn how to use big data to get monitoring of their landscape so that we can envisage things for the future. Impact on the people. The fourth industrial revolution will change not only what we do, but also who we are. It will affect our identity and all the issues associated with it. Our sense of privacy, our notions of ownership, our consumption patterns, the time we devote to work and leisure, and how we develop our careers, cultivate our skills, meet people, and nurture relationships. In this regard, the list is endless and is bound only by our imagination. In terms of shaping the future, neither technology nor the disruption that comes with it is an external force over which we humans have no control. All of us are responsible for guiding its evolution in the decisions that we make on a daily basis as citizens of the world, as consumers, as investors. We should grasp the opportunity and power we have to shape the fourth industrial revolution and direct it towards a future that reflects our common objectives and value. For example, China and India's efforts to be leaders in solar energy, solar space, India's effort to create a powerful Made in India brand for locally manufactured goods in key industries such as automotive and aerospace are positive signs that a new identity for both nations will be forged in forthcoming decades. Ghana, through the initiative of the President Nana Akufo-Addo, seeks to forge forward in the same manner with his commitment to solar and Made in Ghana via his presidential initiative, One District, One Factory. What the fourth industrial revolution will do for Africa is going to create a smart revolution when society is able to simplify and do more things with less. This change will bring down in terms of waste, transform education, increase commerce by eliminating trade bottlenecks, improve governance and transparency, and lead to the emergence of industries. The Industrial Revolution is set to revolutionize the way we work and learn across the entire continent. In Ghana and Africa, agriculture, which is the engine of our economies, will be revamped. Information on farming has been limited. Market price information has previously not been available, which has negatively impacted farmers. The fourth industrial revolution revolves around people and skills, but this can be a double-edged sword with good outcomes only if it is well harnessed. It is a challenge for Africa. Technology is evolving too quickly and could undermine our traditional values, while income disparity keeps widening in terms of the digital divide. But we must embrace it, and we must take advantage of it. African society is on a collision course with the developed world, and the fourth industrial revolution can either reverse this trend or aggravate it. Our survival, therefore, will be knowledge-based, but whether Africans have the financial means of acquiring this knowledge remains an important question. To manage the risks and reap the rewards, Africa should focus on designing an African-focused strategy geared towards the goal of transforming the entire continent. We would work with the UN. They have taken the lead in many of these areas so that we can achieve this goal. The rewards of the big data revolution shall be realized only if young people are inspired to take charge. Time is now for Africa to leapfrog into the fourth industrial revolution. Africa is poised for growth through green industrialization with the development of IT and now big data, Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence in the fourth industrial revolution is at the cusp of a revolution that has tremendous opportunities for the world. Reliance on energy resources, in particular solar, infrastructural gaps, skills, productivity shortages, has undermined the competitiveness of Africa's industrial sector. And I was very glad to hear that in some of the presentations, big data is being used to develop infrastructure. By leapfrogging into the fourth industrial revolution, Africa can take advantage of more productive technologies without being held back by outdated technologies and processes. By leapfrogging, Africa will be closer to achieving sustainable and inclusive growth and meaningful employment while safeguarding its natural assets, which we have in abundance. The path towards green industrialization on the continent can only be paved by the adoption of a combination of investment in innovative technologies, skills training, and the willingness to implement policies that identify green industrialization as the backbone of the continent's socio-economic transformation. Africa has proven its capacity to leapfrog. The world's most groundbreaking mobile innovations come from Africa. With bold leadership from African leaders, from African businesses, we can do this again and become a big stakeholder in the industrial revolution. In conclusion, therefore, we invite institutions such as T-Hub, technology innovators, entrepreneurs, and investors to partner with governments and businesses in Africa in general and in Ghana in particular to kickstart the fourth industrial revolution in Africa and Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you for giving us the insight in what the fourth industrial revolution and all the technologies and developments around data means for Africa. But maybe the most important is that you raised the question, what? What do we want this revolution, these technologies, these developments, these innovations add to society and to the citizens of Africa and the world? I think it's a question for all of us. So thank you for that. Thank you very much. I promised to give you, as an audience, the space in the room to ask some questions about what you've heard this morning. So, are there questions? And any question is good. Don't hesitate, don't be shy. No question is wrong. Only answers can be wrong. So do you have a question for the panel or for people in the audience? I see you over there. I'm sorry I don't know your name. Maybe you can introduce yourself. Is there a mic for... Microphone, please.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Here.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Can I?
Can you please introduce yourself? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Aditya Sathe from CDSA Pune. I would like to ask a question to Mr. Stephen that while maintaining the national and international database structures, how can we take care of context-specific issues and indicators? If I would like to elaborate on it, while solving the problems about water resources and the solution for the problems in Hyderabad, they won't be similar to the similar problems in Pune or Mumbai.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
If I understood it well, but I'm not quite sure if there are any suggestions to, for example, a Hyderabad city to start on with the goals?
As the geographical conditions of Hyderabad won't be similar to any other cities, so the problems and the solutions will be different, and the indicators of the measuring those solutions and impact of solutions will be different. But while compiling the national and international databases, we should maintain the similar indicators. So how can we address the context-specific issues?
Very good question. We are speaking here about global approach. And is that possible? Isn't it so that there should be specified solutions to specified situations? Can you say something about that, Stefan?
Are you collecting?
Question was.
Are you collecting questions, or we do one more?
Okay. Yeah. The suggestion is first to collect questions. Are there more questions? A mic over there, please.
Yes, I have one. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, panelists, for your excellent presentation. I have just 3-4 questions to the panelists. Number one, how the geotechnology can be utilized more accurately to the causes of extreme poverty in practice to address.
You have it. I'm okay. I can write it.
To address 1.4 billion of people are at risk of hunger. I have seen crop monitoring, yes, it will greatly help to the system, but how it will help extreme poverty need of the world. Number two, I have geotechnology to that as if engineers matter. So how it can be customized for it, user-friendly, to reach, to cover more areas of lives and people. And number three, how do you suggest to build capacity of young generation to this technology for future decade or centuries for their accountability and responsibility to serve the world in future? And the last one, vision for change. How the panelists think, how geotechnology can help the world in coming centuries for better living and to reduce inequalities.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your question. I'll be a little bit practical because the first 3 ones were difficult to understand. So I asked the panel to concentrate on the last one. How can we help to solve problems in society for this moment? Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I'm Lawal Zakari from Nigeria. I coordinate the Nigeria's monitoring and evaluation system. My question is to the first speaker, who highlighted that the SDGs now provide a unique opportunity for building national monitoring systems, which can be supported by the several data sources, administrative, geospatial, and otherwise. So my question is, which unit of the UN system in this in countries will provide a support to national governments to ensure that they strengthen such kind of systems to support the monitoring of the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll leave it to that for this moment. Just first maybe answering the question. The last one, if I understood it well, but the sound is very bad here, so I'm sorry if I don't translate it that well, but the last one is the UN system. How can we use that locally? Stefan, may I ask you
Yes,
to start with answers?
Maybe I can start off, and I'm sure my colleagues have something to contribute. I think the first question was a question about how specific should indicators be, and if you address certain issues at a city level, it will be different than if we address it at the global level. And that is absolutely correct, and I like to talk about an indicator architecture. These 200 indicators, or 230, 40, are sort of the minimum set. I mean, those are the ones that we are trying to collect information for at the global level, so we will need them at all national levels to create a picture all over the world. This does not mean that these are all the numbers, that these are the only numbers you need to manage a country or a region or a city. I mean, our recommendation, in fact, is that countries take those global indicators and review them very carefully, which ones are the ones that apply to them and which are high priority, and add to them, because there may be sectors that are specifically policy relevant for this country. I mean, I can give you an example. Switzerland will not be very much concerned about coastal management or ocean rising, and so I mean, there are clear examples that not all indicators apply to everybody. The only thing we are recommending is, if you use an indicator in a particular area, then use the one that the United Nations has defined, because then it makes it easier for us to compare between countries and to aggregate. And so, but I would certainly understand that at the national already, and even more so at the regional and local level, you may have additional indicators that you need. So much to the topic of indicator architecture. I think capacity building, one of the questions was about capacity building. This is where my heart is. I mean, we really need to build capacity at all levels, statistical, geospatial capacity. This will require investments, and I think that the public sector is called to do an effort to invest and even, I mean, also educate. At schools already, make people sensitive about data literacy, what statistics and data and geospatial information means, and so there's lots to be done. But I think here the private sector can also help, because they are really experts and have the tools to help to make the wider audience better understand what these data mean and how we can use them. The last question was about the UN support. There are various layers of support. I mean, in terms of, for instance, building a national system, and so my office can help, because we are right now working on a handbook for statistical organization and management on how you can bring all these information elements together. If you have very specific needs, for instance, in order to improve your education statistics, then our colleagues in UNESCO would help. I mean, and of course, it is often done in partnership with the UN resident agencies, who are the funding agencies, and then, for instance, the UNDP, whom you know because they are your partner at the government level, they would be your first go-to point, but that they would bring the experts of the UN statistical, UN information system in to help you. But I think I would first knock on the door of your UNDP representative, or if you have any really specifically statistics and geospatial information related question, you are also welcome to address me directly.
Thank you, Stefan. Prashant, you would like to add something?
I wanted to sort of come at this in a very different way. I was very deliberate in my presentation to make sure it was fairly high level. Because I think what we're confronted with right now when we're combining stats and geospatial data and information is the classic tension when you're looking at sustainable development goals between the theoretical underpinnings of public choice theory versus social choice theory. So from a public choice theory, what we're trying to do is we're trying to mathematically figure out what the economic value or what the inherent societal value is going to be in terms of contributing to sustainable development. And some of the questions when they're saying, you know, well, what does this mean for poverty, that are coming from the audience, is really about social choice, which is how as a collective do we come together to address some of our most basic needs. So when I said that pictures and our ability as a geospatial community to provide pictures is really important, because at the most elemental level, not everybody is going to be able to do that public choice, statistical, aggregated, theoretical analysis that goes into these big textbooks. But what people can see is change that happens on the surface of the planet, whether it's local or whether it's national. And I think we have the capabilities and the technology systems are there. And our ability to go from local to national is one of the issues that's plagued us in our area because we've recognized this tension. So for the Canada Centre for Mapping and Earth Observation, for the gentleman from Hyderabad, in terms of the water issues, sir? In terms of the water issues, your issues from Hyderabad, I'd be happy to sit down and talk to you about how it is we can seamlessly go from a national level almost to the level of, 1 square kilometer by 1 square kilometer, all the way up to a national level and aggregate the statistics. And these are, the capabilities are there. It's a question of how you collect the statistics and how you do that. So I think that in working through the system and supporting Stefan and the United Nations, we should also be empowering at the local level. But then it's also important that you actually are able to show people the changes that are happening. And the most powerful way to do that is not through the numbers, and I'm speaking as an economist, is not through the numbers, but through the pictures of what's happening in around your local area.
Thank you, Prashant, and thank you for a lovely invitation, I think. Virginia, do you have to
Yes,
comment
on the first question about this tension between a global approach and how it really helps folks in communities around the world. And, for the big picture, like Prashant was saying, we had to focus on, global, but this ability to scale up from the local scale to the global scale is dependent upon interoperability of our systems and the ability to consider drivers of changes, not just, and in my notes too, I say the societal priorities vary, and those have to be considered when the solutions are determined, but the drivers of change are also different. You can't, like I'm a coastal scientist, and you can't transfer what you know about one coastal system's vulnerability even to go 10 kilometers down the coast. And with confidence say, this is exactly what the outcome's going to be here. So we need to scale solutions as well as knowledge from the local to regional. And I think that's a theme that you've heard throughout the past 2 days, or since Monday. And on the crop monitoring, I agree, it's not the silver bullet solution to poverty. It is one facet of a very complex driver of poverty and vulnerability that is that we need to tackle. So how can we solve this long-term problem? The second part of that question, and I think that this more intense integration towards more Earth systems understanding, both natural systems and human systems, in terms of the data streams and allowing artificial intelligence and machine learning to help us to solve these problems. And we talk about the fourth industrial revolution. Have you heard of the fourth paradigm in scientific? Yeah, it's comparable. From a science lens, we talk about the fourth paradigm, where we've gone from descriptive science as the first, the surveys that all the countries have been through, people on horseback, inventorying geology, for example, to more theoretical and experimental science, to modeling, and finally to a data-intensive paradigm. So it's changing the science of the world as well as the private sector, the things we've talked about the past few days, but from a science lens, it really matches nicely, I think, with some of the comments we've just heard.
Thank you very much. Time is too short to discuss all those very important topics. Michael, High Commissioner, do you have a last message for us?
Yes. For me, the reason why it's imperative that Africa is part of all of this is because, for example, when it comes to predictive analysis, we don't need to be at the stage where we have to wait for the World Bank to, for example, tell us that, oh, Ghana is going to be the fastest growing economy in 2018. Because then we have been able to invest in the big data to be able to do all the things that are associated with it. For example, we don't need to always wait on the UN to be able to avert hunger in Ethiopia, because maybe Ethiopia on its own would have been able to put together big data to give it the opportunity to either get the artificial intelligence there ready, so that they're able to also put in their machine learning processes and all the various ingredients that are available to these various organizations and countries. However, we also admit that there is a challenge, and the challenge is funding, because we all know that all of this is not cheap, whether it's geospatial pictures or information in terms of your water, in terms of your food, in terms of agriculture, in terms of your health. All of this is quite expensive. So we need to find a way to bridge that funding gap and be able to answer those challenges accordingly.
Thank you very much. Thank you for attending us in this binding topic, and thank our panelists for giving an insight on this subject. So thank you very much. And I'm sure we will be here in the break because there's a lot of food for thought, and we will be here in the break and just ask us the things you have to ask. Otherwise you don't sleep maybe tonight if you didn't get the answers. Thank you very much.
Session, and thank you panelists for your valuable insights. I'm sure your valuable insights and your suggestions are going to help a lot of people in achieving the sustainable development goals, and the government institutions and the industry, the private industry, to come together, collaborate and partner to achieve what a global goal is. Thank you so much. I request you all for a warm round of applause for the expert opinions given to us by the panelists. Thank you. We'll be breaking for tea and coffee right now, and 11:30 we'll be starting the next plenary session on location analytics. Thank you.
I know these places. These sounds.
Navigator to Connaught Place.
I know these places.
हाँ इसको ये आवाज़ में इंटरफेयर करेगा ना ये बात ये बस हाँ।
A very good morning to all of you. A very warm welcome to all of you to the plenary on Location World, Transforming Business with Location Analytics and Business Intelligence. I welcome all of you. To begin with, what is location? Location matters, and so does the place. Place also matters. It fundamentally influences and connects our ways of doing business. The demand for geographic business intelligence and analytic solutions has increased significantly and seminally. Location is fundamental to all aspects of business, from deciding where to locate a new store, to optimizing a supply chain, or creating more engaged marketing campaigns that resonate with the best customers. To each, location holds different meaning. Business has used geographic information systems for decades to analyze, visualize, and understand location information, and to make more informed business decisions in real time and space. Let us show you how it does. Can I request you to play the video?
I know these places. These sounds.
Navigate to Connaught Place, New Delhi.
These people. I know these alleys. They look familiar. Smell familiar. Feel familiar. At times different. The roads, trees, hills, these places, they all have a history. Every footstep we take brings us closer to that. Today I'm here, someone else tomorrow. This is my world, my location. Enter my world.
After 100 meters, you will reach your destination.
Today, we have an interesting panel to discuss on transforming business, location analytics, and business intelligence. It is indeed an honor and privilege for me to welcome our moderator of the session, Pallav Bagla. He is a senior journalist, NDTV India. Sir, I welcome you. Pallav Bagla, you are a charismatic science communicator respected for your deep understanding of Indian science and technology system. You have won many national and international awards for your work. Your pioneering work showcasing India's maiden mission to Mars and Moon has been applauded and have been talked about. In your 2 decades of writing for the prestigious American weekly Science, your stories have highlighted India to the world. He has won 3 national awards for his science writing, and he runs a daily photo blog on Twitter titled Enjoy Nature, and has authored several books. Sir, can I request you to take this session forward? Thank you so much.
Good morning, friends. It's a delight to be back in Hyderabad, literally the happening city, and a city which is kind of fighting for its location between two states. In the audience, if there are people who are not here for this session on location and business intelligence, I can tell you, you are still at the correct location. This is where you will learn everything about how to do better business, how to apply location to your own capabilities and resources, and to take steps to make both life of citizens better and also to make enterprises smooth. I'm a news hound. We follow locations very, very carefully. But one thing I normally switch off on my smartphone is my location. When I'm tweeting or putting stuff on Facebook, it would usually be stripped off the location. And that is so that my competition is not informed where I am. In the audience, we have very, very distinguished speakers and also people who understand this business. One of them I need to acknowledge is Dr. Shailesh Nayak, who gave India its pioneering systems, both for tsunami warning and also for other forecasting aspects when he was the Secretary of the Ministry of Earth Sciences. The panel we have is very interesting. We have a person from the digital world, which is Mr. Lakshmi Narayan Rao, whose moniker is Lux. For my generation, Lux was a soap. In the digital world, Lux means Lakshmi Narayan Rao of Cisco. We also have somebody who understands weather. Weather is something which affects all our lives. If there is one thing which is common in every news bulletin which we carry in NDTV, it is weather. Prime Minister Modi may not find place, President Trump may not find place, but weather always does, because weather decides so many things for us. And today, energy, resources, how they get allocated, how businesses run their things get decided by weather. And for that we have Hitesh Upadhyay. I'm not giving their full biodata. Each one comes up, gives his 10 minutes presentation, and then I introduce each one before that. We also have somebody who understands advertising and understands real estate. Probably the only thing which makes money these days is real estate. So somebody who understands real estate and also speaks about how to do specifically targeted advertising, smart advertising. We have Manoj Mishra from Ground Truth. We also have, like any good thing there has to be a surprise element. And the surprise comes in the form of, if it's money-oriented, it's always the best. So we have Mr. Nitin Chugh, who's the country head of HDFC. He is our surprise entrant who will also speak to us about these areas. Each speaker gets 10 minutes. I will remind them at 8 minutes to conclude in the next 2. After that, we have a small discussion, and then I want more audience interaction. So there would be a mic going around, and ideally, you should please ask questions. But there are specialists in the audience who want to give a short statement, maybe a minute or two. That would also be acceptable. But if you want to give a 10-minute speech, that may be difficult. And then we conclude, and we need to conclude this by 1 o'clock, because the location of the stomach and hunger remains the same wherever you are in the world. So we need to cater to that. Can I invite the speakers to come up on stage? Mr. Lakshmi Narayan Rao, Mr. Hitesh Upadhyay, Manoj Mishra, and Nitin Chugh. Please. While they settle down, I will introduce Lakshmi Narayan Rao, or Laks Rao. He is the director and leader of digital transformation at Cisco, looking after both India and the SAARC region. As a leader of digital transformation initiatives, Laks and his teams drive the digital transformation agenda for Cisco and help customers define their digital journey and chart out transformation roadmaps across verticals such as healthcare, manufacturing, retail, and smart cities. Lakshmi Narayan Rao tells me he will speak a little bit about smart cities, which is the big concept which Prime Minister Modi and his government has floated for the country. And I invite Lakshmi Narayan Rao to give his 10-minute talk, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure being here and to share with you some thoughts on really what's happening. I'll start off actually talking about, the saying, and I'm actually taking the liberty of twisting the saying a little bit. There's a saying which goes, there's a time and place or location for everything. I would say, this is the time for everything on location. We are here talking about location, and we've come a long way. From the time when we actually talked about, GIS and systems such as that, being very complex devices that not people actually, very complex technologies not many people regularly used, and it was limited to specialists. The PNDs, the personal navigation devices, have transformed the entire space. I can't imagine anyone today actually venturing out of their house without really, tagging on to one of the maps that is actually always fixed to their mobile phones or actually in their cars. So when the invite came for me to actually speak in this event, I was actually thinking, let's really look at, what are the practical aspects that are shaping about. And I felt that, smart cities, such a wide spectrum, it impacts many, many people, and it's actually got far-reaching impact for the economy of a country as well. So I would like to actually walk you through a quick journey on really what's been the experience and how location plays a pivotal role in the evolution of smart cities, which is the term du jour in the country today. Let's actually to share a little bit about the geotech mega trends. The real-time revolution. Real-time is actually, really the flavor of the day. We talk about real-time everything today. So the real-time revolution is one of the key aspects that's a key mega trend. Miniaturization of technologies, read this as IoT. The next slide will talk to you about actually some of the dramatic advancements in the world of IoT. We are talking about, the kind of the propensity of these devices, the way these guys have, the devices have actually gone about, it's amazing. The numbers are actually, mind-boggling to say the least, and Cisco is actually projecting something like about, 50 billion devices by 2020, and look at the world population. We're talking about 7 billion people and 50 billion devices by 2020, which means we will all actually be on a ratio of 1:7 and walking, talking probes of sensors. This miniaturization of technologies in a way is actually driven a tremendous impetus to actually location and the accuracy of location and the richness of location data. Proliferation of new mobile geospatial sensor platforms. You have actually got drones, you got actually a whole lot of satellites and vehicles that are now actually making the location data much more accurate and specific. Expanding wireless and web networks, and advances in computing capacity. Today we are talking about, very, very specialized, advanced computing capabilities that's making it possible for you to drive artificial intelligence algorithms on actually location data to give you near real-time analytics and statistics. What's also happening, and because I actually represent the IT world, what's also happening is actually there's a dramatic change in the way you are collecting and generating data. The infrastructures are changing. You're now talking about cloud computing. You're actually talking about, specificity of collection of information, at point of need, or actually the edge, as we call it. We've got actually access layers that are changing in a dramatic way. Analytic engines are actually getting better and better. And my panel colleague will be talking about it here. Hitesh is actually touching upon the analytics part in a bit. I'll touch upon analytics also briefly. And the skills of people, it's constantly evolving. We have actually better quality people now, managing to parse and, slice and dice the data to actually get much more meaningful impact. So much so that this is becoming a key element, for monetization today. Communications is being redefined, and this is actually one slide on megatrends before we jump headlong into actually the key topic that we want to talk about. The IoT market spending in 2020, which is just around the corner, is 1.7 trillion. If there's any one technology trend that's actually really taken the world by storm in the world of IT, it's actually the IoT. 50 billion devices connected, I talked about it already. I don't want to really talk about Bitcoin. We actually have mixed reactions and emotions around that. But you can see that the kind of buzz that is actually created. And data produced by autonomous vehicles, we all talk about AVs or autonomous vehicles. Every single vehicle will actually be generating about 2 petabytes of data, so much so that the auto sector is looking at new ways of monetizing this data. Location becomes an integral element, to their plan and strategy. Now let's look at, space and the smart cities opportunity. What is the impact? What is actually the importance of location on smart cities? We've got a lot of visitors over here. Welcome to India. In India, one of the hottest topics that's actually there on mission mode, the discussion is around smart cities. Our Honorable Prime Minister, 2.5 years ago actually, unleashed this 100 smart cities aspect, or a 100 smart cities project, primarily to actually reduce the rapid urbanization that's happening in the country. If you look at actually some of the larger cities in the country, as you would know, they're all actually reeling under infrastructure problems and the like. So 100 smart cities would actually do a whole lot to the development of the country and the economy. And while it was actually a big vision, we are seeing tremendous traction that's actually happening on the ground. We are at the forefront of some of these evolution and some of the implementation around smart cities, and I would like to actually talk to you about a little bit about this. What are the focus areas of smart cities? I've actually put that into 4 buckets. You got urban mobility, you got citizen engagement, you got sustainability, and urban safety. Look at every aspect of all the applications and services in these 4 buckets, and you will know why location is a divine match for smart cities. It's so important. And for those of you who are actually, in the business of actually, producing applications and services in this room over here, this is a wonderful opportunity because there's a tremendous amount of need that is there that's generated for people to actually have location-specific data, and the richness of data actually has to be, very critical. Now, if I just take a step back, it's not as if automation did not happen in the cities. What is different now? Why is it that it's actually, suddenly become, the flavor? It's important to note that, cities have actually always, or for that matter, any of these projects have addressed problems in silos. So you had a massive safety and security, safe city deployment happening, but that was done in isolation. You had traffic management happening, but that was not talking to another, adjacent application. Lighting across the city. All of these things were actually independent silos that was there. With the advent of actually, with the GIS layer integration actually into smart cities, this has been one of the major ways in which we are able to integrate the whole thing into a common infrastructure, common integrated infrastructure for smart cities. We are now able to actually, cross-leverage a lot of resources by having one common layer that's now actually able to exchange information simply because of the location advantage or the location knowledge that we actually have about specific areas. particularly in the field of safety and security, where we've got actually tens of thousands of cameras in every city, and traffic and management, which earlier followed an independent channel. Now we are able to actually combine both of them, and the confluence happens at the location layer or the GIS layer for us to actually derive rich data, feed it back into the system, and the applications are now able to provide meaningful business insights. So when I look at the architecture for the smart city, there are actually multiple layers over there. Let me just actually describe to you the 5 key layers that are there. There's something called a street layer. The street layer is actually all the sensors, the cameras, and all the devices that are there. Then you got the access layer, the transportation layer. No access, no smart city, no digital. Access is critical. Networking is the key to anything digital. Then you got the compute layer. The compute layer is actually where the processing and all of that happens. Then you got the application layer, where all the applications actually live on a platform. We call it the digital platform. More about that in a bit from now. Finally, you have the presentation layer or the command and control layer. These were the 5 layers which were actually pretty much standard across most smart cities all over the world. But then what we did was actually the yellow layer that you see over there, which is given as a tremendous impetus, not just actually from the point of view of having meaningful data fed back into the system, but it also actually, Pitchfork does right into market leadership position, because we were able to integrate with some of our partners. We work with partners like ESRI, who have actually provided their tools to actually make a much more meaningful, richer data available to the cities, to the citizens, and actually to people who need the data at point of need.
Mr. Rao, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. So in the IoT platform that I actually talked about, it works in tandem with the GIS. So you're able to aggregate the sensor data, you're normalizing the aggregated data, and you're exposing the APIs for local development, which means that you now have actually a rich layer of data that's available for you to actually build more and more services on. And it can actually be streamed in as a cloud service. So all of this actually can be residing in a cloud, and you'll be able to utilize this. Suddenly you see that there's an ecosystem of partnerships and opportunities that are actually coming about because of this big movement called smart cities. So that's the flow. I would like to actually just touch upon one aspect of it. The command and control, which is critical, that's the nerve center of the city. This nerve center actually, is now looking at, very, very relevant and good quality content coming in through the GIS map, where you can see over here, we've integrated that into the command and control center. It's an integral part of every command and control opportunity and RFP, if you can look at that. So we are also able to actually cross-leverage the data and come up with vertical analytics. This is just a snapshot over here. Here is actually a snapshot, is a dashboard. But what's the point of actually looking at a dashboard? I'll just take 30 seconds, Palava, to actually show a view of how a real city dashboard looks like. What are the authorities actually looking at in smart cities? Let me just exit out of this for a bit and log into one of the dashboards. This is live. And all of the vitals for the city, whether it's actually health, or lighting, or parking, or mobility, all of that data is actually coming up straight. Now, this is actually really the marriage, the confluence, which I talked about, between IoT and GIS. Here, I'm able to actually now double-click on this and identify which of the lights are actually need to be replaced. The turnaround time, which used to be a week for replacement of a standard street light, which has actually gone bust, now can actually happen in a matter of minutes or hours. And if I take the map view of that, if I can overlay that on the map, I'll now be able to see, which of the areas have actually got, higher pollution or, worse air quality or traffic jams, or actually a jam that happened instantaneously without really any build-up. All of those things can actually, happen over here. So with this, I would like to, I can actually zoom in here. This is a map of Jaipur, and I can overlay any of these data that I want, whether parking data, lights, environment, traffic, and you'll be able to see this. I'm available here if you'd like to see, in the interest of time, I can't go on this because I have run out of time, but if anyone wants to see granular data around this, reach out to me. I'm here for some more time. I'll be able to actually log in and show you the value of a confluence between GIS and smart cities. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm available here for any questions. Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Rao. Keyword came out was walking and talking sensors. I am currently completely geared up for what would be walking and talking sensors. If you people agree, what we'll do is we'll take questions towards the end, all of them together for all the panelists. Now I invite Hitesh Upadhyay, who's the Asia Pacific leader for the weather company, which is part of IBM. Weather affects everybody, and everybody wants to know what will be the temperature. If you have to wear a coat or wear inner inside if you are in Delhi, or not wear something, or if you have to supply power to a city, whether there will be a demand for power in a particular city at one point or another, whether the power will be expensive or cheap, or whether forecasting monsoons, of which Shailesh was a deep part, all of them depend on weather, and interestingly also on climate, something which the smartest country of the world, USA, kind of currently doesn't want to agree with, which is climate change. I don't know whether Hitesh will address some issues on climate change. Let me introduce Hitesh. Is Hitesh's PowerPoint being set up, please? Yes? Okay. Hitesh is responsible for the overall Asia Pacific operations for the weather company. Prior to his role at the weather company, Hitesh was a corporate M&A at IBM's corporate headquarters in Armonk, New York. He has also served an IBM client executive for large industry accounts. The next 10 minutes are yours, Hitesh.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Pallav. Thanks to my panelists. To be honest, it's a privilege to be among you all. A lot of experts in the room. What I'm going to do is bring a bit of a different dimension to our discussion today, right? So it's location is kind of what I'm going to focus on, but then how do you bring a new dimension that IBM is investing heavily in, which is weather, and then the cognition piece, right? So everybody talks about AI. We have a different spin on it. It's around cognition, which is cognitive, right? Learn as you go. I've been covering this space for a while. There was a lot of talk about analytics, right? Then we were talking about insights. We are now moving towards outcomes, right? And we have realized that weather is a key dimension that impacts a lot of different businesses, impacts you as a consumer. And then we are actually harnessing the power of weather into location analytics, into AI, into cognition, and solving business use cases. So I'm going to dive deeper into how we are monetizing the different dimensions that are available to us. I'm not sure. Okay. So I would like to introduce Mary Glacken. She's our Global Head of Business Solutions. She couldn't join us, unfortunately. That's why I'm kind of the backup speaker, to be honest. But she will share her perspectives for a couple of minutes, and then I'll take it back.
Good day. I'm Mary Glacken with the weather company IBM, and I'm really pleased to be able to spend a few minutes with you today to talk about our company and how we think about geospatial, analytics, location, and bring all of those things together to unlock value for our clients. At its essence, weather forecasting is really a geospatial application, and it all starts with data. And frankly, we have bucket loads of data at the weather company. In addition to all the traditional weather data sources that are used by many weather businesses around and governments around the world, we also leverage both proprietary data and then the Internet of Things. So in proprietary data, one of the prime things I would talk about is our global network of personal weather stations, which has now exceeded more than 275,000 around the globe. The second area is this Internet of Things, and we've been involved in this for quite some time now. So there's two areas that I would highlight there. One is in the aviation, through our partnerships with airlines, we're able to take information off of aircraft that help us be able to predict turbulence and alert pilots as to where to fly and alternate routes to address. The other area is we're now currently getting atmospheric pressure observations from more than 50,000 cell phones. Again, it's a global ingest of this data, and all of that we're able to use in our forecasting capability. And so we really work to unlock the value of this weather forecast by combining it with other data sets to meet clients' needs. So I hope you can see how important the weather company and IBM believe that location information, geospatial applications, and analytics are to both our clients and our customers globally. Here to tell you more about that is my colleague, Haidesh Hubadawe, who's our leader in the Asian Pacific area. Thank you.
So I think the key here is not just the data, right? We have solved the location problem to an extent, right? We have solved the weather problem, right? So we can do real-time forecasting current conditions for any location in the world at a 500-meter resolution, right? So what that means for IBM, for those in AI, in analytics, is how do you unlock some of these use cases, right? So this slide kind of just shares the kind of problems we want to solve, right? Now, why weather and location, right? Mr. Pallav mentioned how he doesn't like to share his location on Twitter and so forth. One thing that not many people know is when you're checking weather on your smartphones, right? So we are the #1 weather app in the world, right? Apple phone, Samsung, they all have our weather app. Google, Facebook uses us as a weather source. Every time you're checking weather, you're actually sharing location with us, right? And not many people hesitate to share the location because they want the most accurate weather condition and forecast for where they are, right? And weather is part of our daily routine, right? We start the day with weather, right? If it's raining in Hyderabad, you know how your commute is going to look. And also consumer behavior, right? This is where we are unlocking these use cases. The way you act, what you buy, and just your consumer behavior, we feel there's a very deep connection between weather insights, location, and then, of course, all the other data that is coming through the enterprise. So what do we have, right? If you have an Apple phone, for example, right? If you just, I don't have to do a live demo. You can just open the Apple weather app, and you're seeing our data, right? So we are actually one of the most downloaded apps in the world, and more than 100 million active users in real time that we are tracking, right? What does that mean? When you start applying these insights, these location insights and weather insights, we can unlock a lot of business value. And this is what IBM is trying to do, right? We want to grow this to a $1 billion business in the next 3 years. So there's a lot of power in that, and I'll give you some examples on how we are doing that. In terms of impact, Mr. Pallav mentioned energy, right? Energy forecasting is key. Agriculture, in terms of yield, irrigation management. You think about financial services, agri loans, for example, the risk that you carry on your books, and then of course aviation, and there are a lot of other businesses that are impacted by weather. And then, as you know, IBM has been very strong in the enterprise and the AI world, so we're bringing all of that together in real time to solve these use cases. What we try to kind of illustrate here is the scale, right? We process more than 26 billion API calls, right? So every time you open your app and you check weather, right, it is giving the most accurate forecast where you are, right? And we go down to a 500-meter resolution, right? So if you walk, say, a kilometer from here and you pull the app again, we are doing a fresh forecast for you. Now, the key thing there is location, right? We know where you are. And it's just kind of incredible the scale that you can start applying these insights. So this is just one example, and then Manoj, who's going to come after me, in fact, he's going to exemplify this simple use case, right? So as I said, we are doing real-time weather analytics, right, which was not possible, 5 years ago. Analytics have become so powerful that we can do this today, right? We can actually deliver right messages. Where we know where you are, we know the environment around you, right? We know your purchase data, your history, your behavior, right? We can actually deliver right messages to you in real time. And then we have something called trigger-based, use cases, right? So based on all your historic behavior, weather patterns, location, we can predict, right? Weather is one of the few things that you can actually forecast, right? There are not many things you can forecast. So when you have a pattern and you start applying to the future, right? We can tell you in 3 days' time, based on what you did on a rainy day in Hyderabad, kind of actions you will be taking. Just imagine the impact to your business if we have that insight, right? So that's the kind of things we're trying to unlock. So I'll just touch on one thing, campaign effectiveness, right? We have found a deep correlation, right, between your historical behavior and what you're going to do, days from now. In fact, this is going to be a great segue into what Manoj will talk about, right, is the advertising use case. So again, the idea and the concept that we are driving is about outcomes in different industries, but even from a consumer behavior, it's just amazing how much data and insights you have. Unknowingly, right? You may not know how much of data has been collected. And one thing, the way I like to put it is the way Google has mapped the world, we have mapped the atmosphere, right? And when you bring those two together, right, the geospatial and the atmosphere, it's just amazing the kind of use cases you can drive. So I would like to dive deeper during the discussions, get your questions, your insights, but it is a direction IBM is taking, and for us this is a powerful use case in terms of how analytics, AI, cognition can come together to solve real-time business problems. So I think I beat the 10-minute mark, so thank you so much for attending and joining the panelists. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Hitesh, and lovely to see you keep completely to time. Weather doesn't listen to everybody, but at least Hitesh was considerate to the moderator. I appreciate that. In the past, it was always said that whenever the weatherman said it's going to rain, then you leave your umbrella at home. But that is changing, trust me. The India Meteorological Department has changed that moniker altogether. The 3- and 5-day forecasts by IMD are incredibly accurate these days. We are still learning how to do long-term forecasting of the monsoon, which is a very big if for the country. Once we know that, learning about easier to predict weather in the temperate regions, we have a large audience from the Western world and temperate regions, but the chaos of the tropics is what will challenge the weather company very strongly. And I wonder how he will be able to predict what will be, when it will rain over my house, specifically at what time. Those would be challenges I would be looking forward to. Now we move on. I introduce Manoj Mishra, who's the General Manager for India for Ground Truth India. He's somebody who has a lot of experience in real estate, and from there he's transcending into the area of advertising and smart advertising, which is highly localized and specific to people on their smart devices. Manoj heads the India business operations of Ground Truth. Prior to joining Ground Truth in 2016, he has worked as President Business Investment at Omax Limited and President GIS Business at Genesis Limited. The next 10 minutes are yours, Manoj.
All right. Good afternoon, Hyderabad. This is a homecoming for me. I came here in 1997 to set up a company's branch office. Pallav missed the first part of my life. I spent first 15 years of my career working with data companies, producing data, working with GIS intensely. So all I know is location, location, location. Last year, I made a shift to this company called Ground Truth, and we are a location intelligence company. In today's, I actually want to tell you about the importance of location-based advertising. And I want to keep the things very simple. I won't go into technical side. But why? Can you move to the next slide? So the key is why location is important. And all of you are likely carrying a smartphone. If you look at some of the statistics, I'll take case of US, where we are present, 3 out of 4 people carry smartphone. So you're more than 3. In fact, you're almost covering 80% of the population in US by, you know their locations because they have the mobile phone. One way or other, the location is shared. So you have this load of information flowing in. Now, by virtue of having this mobile phone in your hand and being present at a specific location, the divide between the online and offline is merging. And you can actually go to a store, and many of you do it. You're in a store and you want to Google or you want to search for a specific product. You want to know about the product because you want to be more informed before you make those decisions. But location is a big intent. So let's look at some of the numbers. Like even today, 90% of your purchase happens on the offline stores. Online is growing, but offline is still a huge, substantial number. The interesting fact is that 80% of your purchases are at spur of the moment. You take those decisions right there that you want to buy something. Now, this makes the things very interesting for marketers because now you have the person present at a specific location. You can take advantage of that intent. You're clear that if somebody is walking in a store, he's going to make a purchase. Now, how this location works, I'm not really going to talk much about that because you guys know a lot about this. You get signals from the GPS. If it is on your mobile phone, you can get it from Wi-Fi. The accuracy levels for Wi-Fi are different. Then you can get it from the cell phone triangulation level. Now, all of you guys, most of you guys are working with more precise location, but in the consumer space, we may get varying level of signals from the mobile phones. Now, what does this mean for the advertisers? Now, I'll give you a simple case. And look at the creative. On the mobile phone, when you receive advertisement, if you have a creative here, which is talking about a specific offer, when you are inside the store. On the right-hand side, I have a Dunkin' Donuts store. If I know that person is inside the store, we can serve him a specific campaign. We can teach him about the specific thing which is interesting in the store, which we want to push specifically. We want to sort of promote specifically because we know that person is inside the store. What if the next scenario? This was a shopping place. You have parked the car. Now, you may go to any other place, but if you actually send an offer about, are you hungry, or you send offer about the food, the chances are the person could walk into your store. So that's another level of real-time sort of understanding the location and serving a creative, which actually makes the person to take a decision to come inside the store. And let's look at a wider case. And if you're in a wider area, you actually might want to get the direction to reach to the specific, your store. So you can use the location of the people at a micro level in multiple ways, and on a real-time basis, you can actually change the creatives. This is going to change the user experience significantly. And marketers have started taking the advantage of this. Now, the key is that how do you make the location actionable? Yeah, everything is all about location, but we have to make location actionable. And all this session, GeoWorld Forum, many of us talked about map. We deal with them on a daily basis. But the key is to get the point of interest. You need to know, you can map a building, but you need to know what business is there inside the building. And you need to know whether it's a playground, whether there's a school, you need to be having very specific, precise information to make that information more actionable. So that's simple. The second case is you can actually also figure out the neighborhoods from where you are getting those visits. For the neighborhoods which are likely to have more people coming to your store. Now look at this case. This is slightly dull, but if you look at the heat map there, there's a concentration of visitors who came from different locations. So you can figure out that earlier you'll feel that people will come to your store from a specific radius, but in reality, people may come from different locations. And if you're able to sort of track the location of the people, where did they live, you will get interesting insights which are really, really valuable, and you can take actionable decisions based on that. And the next thing is, you can actually, based on the behavior of people, you can build specific audiences. And so let's take this case where, what do you do in the morning? Suppose you're going to the gym in the morning, and the next thing you're doing, going to the school, and in the afternoon you're doing another activity. And if you actually take this data and mash it up with the demographic data, that if it's a female, you clearly know that this person is a mom. And if you know that the person is a mom, as a marketer, you can actually send specific advertisements to this particular person. So your action on the ground matched with the demographic information is giving you powerful, actionable data. And this is changing the way mobile advertisements are getting served at this point of time. But there is a lot of myth around the accuracy in the data set, and there's a lot. And a lot of location vendors, they're claiming 1 to 3 feet accuracy stuff. In reality, that is not the case. I mean, many of you are experts in that area. You know that mobile phone cannot give you that accurate location. So that's number one. And second is, many of the in this industry are talking about, and when I say this industry, the people in the mobile advertisement space, they are saying that if you draw a radial around a specific point of interest, you can target all the people. In reality, we have done sort of studies. Only 1 out of the 4 people there might be interested in going to the store, and not everybody, because radial is a very wide thing. All right, so let me quickly go to the next step. Now, I want to actually tell you 1 or 2 case studies that we're using this in our business on a day-to-day basis. We use the same technology that I described to run a campaign for Arby's, and we saw a significant sales lift on account of the technology that and the process that I just told you. And another case here is that we actually did the targeting at a block level, retail block level. And that retail block level, saw a 66% increase in sales in this specific case of this pharmacy store. And overall, if we sort of extrapolated that sort of net increase, it was $4 million.
You have another 2 minutes, sir.
Now, let me actually quickly talk about what is the future of location, and specifically in the mobile advertisement space. Hitesh talked about that. That's something that I'm calling as future. The weather information matched with the location information is going to be key. Now, if you know that weather is going to be raining, or you can actually predict the weather is going to be likely to rain, the advertisers can actually start sending advertisements regarding the raincoats or the rain wear that you might be interested in. The probability of your taking a decision to buy increases significantly. And if it's sunny weather, you have a different kind of advertisement coming in. The next is, we will see a lot of analysis, real-time analysis going on the trends. Which day there were more visits. Next is that within the day, which hours saw more visits? And how do you sort of compare with your competitor? How is the market doing? How are you doing? So there'll be kind of real-time analytics of your data set. And what I'm showing you is actually part of the product that we are working on. So the future of using and applying location for transforming the businesses is really bright. We will see a lot of action in this space in the coming days. And on this note, I want to say thank you, and I'll be happy to take any questions later on.
Thanks a lot, Manoj. I think the future is very bright for location-based advertising, though my personal experience with what would be called intelligent advertising seems rather dull. You buy a product from Google or buy a product from Amazon, and then repeatedly, the same mobile phone keeps showing up on my smartphone. Once I have bought the product, the company should know I have already bought the product. I don't want to waste more time looking at it. So there is some intelligence that needs to be incorporated in the systems, because at the end of the day, it wastes bandwidth and my precious time. And I don't want to look at advertising if it's wasting my time. So please, somewhere you have to be smart and smarter. I now call upon Nitin Chugh, who's the country head of digital banking in HDFC Bank. The push from the government for digitization is so great that more and more people are being forced to use digital banking and all kinds of digital platforms for transfer of money, that at times it worries the common user how safe it is and how whether the privacy would be breached. Even as we speak now, the Supreme Court of India is hearing a petition on the universal ID, Aadhaar. And banks are today mandated to link accounts to Aadhaar. What would happen to that data? I'm not worried. I pay my taxes, but I'm sure Nitin would tell us what happens to his consumers who don't want to pay taxes enough. Just to introduce Nitin, Nitin is currently head digital banking and personal liability products and portfolios. He's also responsible for the inbound and outbound contact centers and the role of digital banking and digital solutions. I'm sure Prime Minister Modi loves Nitin Chugh than anybody else. Probably next would come Benjamin Netanyahu. The next 10 minutes are yours, Nitin.
Thank you, Velav. So good afternoon, everyone. Since I was the wildcard entry, I don't have a presentation. I'll only talk, and I hope I can get your attention. So what I'm going to share with you is how a boring business like banking can also use attribute of location. I can see some old familiar faces here. Hi, Ajay. So I think I'll just probably talk about how we used to use location as an attribute in the old world, and we continue to use that even for defining a very basic thing as where should you set up a branch, where should you set up an ATM. So that continues even today. Now that may not use all the most recent technology that people are going to be talking about and have spoken about, but it does use a lot of information which is published, which could be RBI deposit data, it could be the SEC data, it could be all kinds of demographic information collected through research. Now from a time that we've been using information like that, I think we've made such good progress because of the fact that now there is just so much of technology available that is possible to drive multiple use cases. So I'll just try and cover a few which I quickly jotted down on my way here to the conference. I think one example, if you look at, ATMs, all of us use ATMs here, or would have used ATMs much more than probably what we use today, considering that Pallav talked about the whole digital migration that's happening. ATMs were always under surveillance. but the surveillance was always through CCTVs. It continues to be through CCTVs, but now there are better ways of surveying even an ATM. We did something more recently in HDFC Bank. We actually said now we want to know actually what's happening on a real-time basis. Can you convert all the information that you know about location and the attributes around location, can you move them to something which makes sense on a real-time basis? And we put out something like a command center, which is tracking all the conversations online, which is tracking, where people are tweeting from, about what. And we came across very interesting, problems that needed to be solved almost real-time. Because if you are using real-time information, the expectation is that the solution will also come real-time. You cannot use real-time information using a location attribute or any other blended attribute and come up with a solution with, let's say, a 48-hour or a 72-hour turnaround time. So these things gave us insights like one specific ATM, which could have been under surveillance using a CCTV earlier. There were 3 tweets from that geolocation, which we were able to zero down on using the digital command center capability, saying that there seems to be a problem in this ATM because 3 customers have complained that they've not found enough cash in the last 3 days when they've gone. So it seems to be running dry more often than what it usually used to be. I'll just let Pallo finish his conversation because you're also mic'd up. Now from there, since we have location available practically on the move, how do we really convert that into a different sort of a use case? So again, continuing the example of ATMs, we did an experiment with AI and a fintech based out of Bangalore. We matched the ATM location with the GPS location of the mobile phone of the customer to decide whether the customer was in proximity of the ATM, because every ATM has a terminal ID. And it is normally assumed that you're carrying your mobile phone if you're going to be using the ATM. Maybe in 5% cases you would leave the phone behind. But we realized that there were at least 1 or 2% of those cases which were potential risk cases, where you could run a risk rule to say that, okay, I want to decline this transaction, because it seems like the phone is somewhere else and the customer is looking like he's using an ATM in a very different location. And based on that, we could generate multiple such rules to say, okay, do you want to decline? If it is of a certain value, a certain distance from the phone and between the phone and the ATM location, do you want to alert the customer? Do you want to remind him? So you can actually start generating different use cases by just using a very simple attribute that where is the phone, is it in proximity of the ATM that you're trying to use. Closer to that, obviously, is the use case of what Manoj also spoke about. I mean, we've been doing this for several years now. So you go and shop at a certain mall, we pick up the terminal ID on where you've swiped your card. It's very easy to tell you that, okay, we have another offer in the same place that you're around. But the more recent challenge that I've been throwing at the marketing team in the bank is that, what if I start from home and I'm going to watch a movie in a Cineplex, and I have, through Google Maps, telling me that I'll take 1 hour to reach my destination, and I actually end up reaching there, let's say, half an hour or 45 minutes before the movie has to start. Can you pick up my location and tell me that in the half an hour that I have to spare, here is an offer for you? Now that needs blending of multiple sets of information, one coming from the car, coming from the smartphone, coming from the fact that the customer has walked into the mall and maybe some beacon or somebody else picks it up, and then blends it together and says that, okay, this customer, based on the persona, based on what we know, is most likely to probably just stop by for a coffee while he's waiting for his movie, or maybe just wants to grab a beer before he wants to watch his movie. But those are things that I think will make sense only if we can convert this information into real-time actionables. And most of the time, what we're realizing is that the information is real-time, what you want to action is also real-time, but the call to action for the customer is not real-time. If the customer gets a trigger based on some attribute in the moment, and that context is going to change in the next 5 minutes because he will move from that location to another location, what should be that call to action for those 5 minutes that he actually turns that recommendation or that message into something that the marketer is trying to do? So that was more on the marketing side, but I think even on the side of cybersecurity, risk management, location is becoming very, very critical for us. It has always been used not as geolocation, but certainly in terms of the IP address and all of those attributes, where we use that as a very careful way of managing and dimensioning cybersecurity risks. And then multiple rules are built on top of that. How do you want to decline a transaction? Do you want to build additional levels of checks? Do you want to build additional sets of rules around that? And finally, what I'd like to say is that one very important part in this whole ecosystem is the people who work in the enterprise, the employees of the companies, who are trying to either market or trying to build transactions for customers, or basically the face of the organization for customers. Even their performance management, we have been experimenting with some of those use cases also, where I'm sure a lot of people in this room also do that, where you can actually do much better optimized route mapping, route planning, and even tracking and monitoring of your people while they're on the move, so that you actually get to extract much better results from what they would have otherwise produced. And in the end, one other last point is really about, I think Manoj and Pritesh also spoke about that briefly, the convergence of all of this now coming together. So whether it is IoT, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's going to be location information, whether it's going to be the static data or the real-time data being generated through multiple transactions happening on the phones or otherwise, how do we assimilate all that, bring it together, convert it into something which defines it as the in-the-moment action to be taken, whether on the security side or on the marketing side or for any other developed use case, which should be so contextual that if the whole context changes, if the customer moves from one context to another, it just becomes irrelevant. So we are trying to see if we can move from marketing use cases which are probably valid for the next, let's say 72 hours, to a marketing use case which is valid only for the next 5 minutes or the next 10 minutes, and after that they just become void. And I'll stop at that, because since I didn't have a presentation, these are more free-flowing thoughts and more from the experience and how we've tried to use some of these capabilities in the bank. And I look forward to some more interaction with the audience. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Nitin. My personal wish would be, if while you do your smart banking solutions, if you can alert me as an individual, when my daughter goes into a mall, I can switch off her debit card or credit card. That would be very useful for me as a father. I think you need to figure out a way of doing that for some smart people like me and poor people like me. We have exactly 17 more minutes before the session ends. It's a hard and fast closure, not just because of the location of the stomach, but the high-profile minister, Hardeep Puri, his location is already at HICC, and he would be speaking at 1 p.m. I want to ask one simple question to each one of the participants, and then maybe open up very quickly for 3 or 4 questions from the audience. Maybe each one of you can address in less than a minute what is your expectation from the government to make it easy for you to do business in each of your sectors? Starting with you, Lux.
Right. Great question, and I think government plays a very pivotal role in ensuring that the environment is actually appropriate for nurturing technologies and what it can actually do for the overall good. Having said that, I would say that the quality based criteria in evaluating technologies is important. One of the things that the government actually has to be cognizant of, and it's happening. It's the heartening thing is that it's actually happening in a majority of the places. We're looking at actually not today's implementation, not even tomorrow's implementation, but look at a window of 5 to 6 years time or 5 to 10 years time, because technology acceleration is actually extremely fast, and we don't want to be playing catch up. We need to be ahead of the curve in these areas. And I would say that this whole transparency in the procurement process, I think actually is moved a lot from what it was earlier, and it should continue in the same momentum and actually make it extremely easy for all types of stakeholders to engage with the government. Startups, larger organizations, everybody should be given an egalitarian platform for engaging with the government and being a part of this large digitization movement. Thank you.
Hitesh, maybe for you, I don't know, maybe you want to address it to God because, or to atmospheric phenomenon because they affect you far more than the government. The government has very little control. The ministers constantly say, "Bhai, ye to upar wala kar raha hai, hum kya kare?" Lord Indra, maybe. What would you want from him?
So, one thing not many people realize is weather science has really evolved a lot in the last 10 years, right? So the kind of things we can do today is just incredible in terms of forecast accuracy and the kind of insights we can provide. Now, for us in the weather business, it used to be a government mandate, right? We are the largest private weather provider in the world. And then our missions complement, right? So the government is a close partner to us because, IMD, the Ministry of Earth Sciences, right? There's a lot of public data that we ingest. Then, of course, we have our proprietary algorithms and IoT platforms we use. Our missions are complementary, right? The government is focused more on citizen safety, focused more on agriculture, on aviation, military. Our mandate is solving business problems, right? So, the partnership is important because we need high quality data, right, to be part of our portfolio so we can get better accuracy. But then, as IBM, when we bring cognitive, we bring location, we are solving business problems, which is not the pure mandate or the mission of the government. So we go hand in hand, and our mission is to bring weather insights to businesses and solve problems. And the government is a great partner for us. So we thank IMD, the Earth Sciences Group, for partnering with us and helping us provide the best to the Indian enterprises.
What about you, Manoj? Maybe you could also help NDTV garner more revenue through advertising by specifically targeting when we do our digital platform work.
Okay, so I think, before I take the specific question, I want to clarify on one of the points that when you use the location, you can actually send very specific advertisement to people and that can avoid the trouble that you face, the retargeting. And that's actually the future. I mean, what you should be given, what you need and not what you don't need. This one. As far as the government sort of request from government is concerned, there's no specific thing because luckily all the governments across the globe are focusing more on the mobile sort of space. Mobile penetration is increasing, and the more that is increasing, we're simply sort of leveraging that platform to serve contextual advertisement. I think what can happen in future is maybe government can start using the same technology to provide real-time information to the people in the time of disaster or things like that, because the private sector is going to build that infrastructure in any case for marketing, and this could be leveraged. So that's something for future and not for now.
What about you, Nitin? Because
so I won't even take a minute because I think we are at the moment trying to play catch up to all the things that the government has already done. So it's more the ask on our side for the moment rather than what we want the government to be doing enough or more, because I think financial services is anyways such a subject that the government is always very, very actively involved. And most of the time, especially with digital payments and the whole focus on digital transactions, the 2,500 crores digital transaction target that all the banks are and various other departments are carrying. I think all of us are trying to play catch up at the moment. So nothing more to ask for right now.
Maybe you may want to address how you could use location-based services to catch and get all your NPAs, the non-performing assets, to give back money to you.
So the example that I gave of the ATM, location, ATM and the GPS location combination, we could only do a pilot with some 25,000 customers because we needed permission from customers. Because you can't otherwise, just go about tracking their location if it is not permissioned. So some of these things which are security related, some of these things which are risk management related, those I think we can probably ask for a different view, that can you override individual consent every time, even if only if it is a security or risk management use case. If it's for marketing, by all means, you do need permission and a very clear opt-in into doing something like that.
Questions from the audience? There's a learned audience out there. Yes, sir. Just give your name and affiliation and a very quick question, sir.
I am Dr. Mahesh Gaur. I am a scientist in ICR. I have a question from Nitin. Nitin, I would like to know how safe is the digital transaction?
See, I can, in a nutshell, I can tell you it's absolutely safe because the kind of incidents that you see, they usually happen because people unwillingly compromise their credentials. They do not happen because somebody hacks into the system, because all systems are very, very well protected. So there are enough and more security layers around that. So the challenge to do with, the real challenge is about customer education, which is, banks like us actually spend a lot of money and effort trying to, keep making customers more and more aware of what they should be doing, because newer trends keep emerging. But all I can say is that as long as we exercise caution and we follow a set of do's and don'ts, very basic, simple things like, don't access from a public Wi-Fi, don't divulge your credentials to anybody, even if somebody says I'm calling from the bank, even if it, like the mails that you also see coming, or the notifications even from the Reserve Bank of India saying that we will never ask you for all of these details, we'll never send you an email, asking you for your credentials. Those are the ones people need to ignore. And finally, people shouldn't succumb to greed, because most of these incidents have happened where, the usual lottery scam or, money mules kind of use cases, where people succumb to some kind of a greed that, I've left this inheritance to you, so now, you need to write back to me and give me your account number and credentials and I'll transfer this money into your account. Those have to be resisted, and, people need to be careful with that.
I give one incidence to you.
Sir, can we have another question if you don't mind? You can discuss it offline also with him over lunch.
Sure, sure.
Other questions, sir? Yes, sir. We'll come to you next, sir.
Hi, this is Pani from Geospatial. The question is to Hitesh. You said, you have a lot of weather data, right? So is it available in any form for others to partner with and develop applications? IBM is developing applications well and good, but having such a huge data, if there are partners outside who can actually co-create, I think there can be a lot better.
Yeah, and I think that what you just asked applies to all of us, right? The great thing about technology now is it's all real time, it's all on the cloud. So everything we do, it's all API based, it's all latitude, longitude. So you can give us any location, we'll give you the most accurate weather forecast possible. And yes, it's an ecosystem play. We have a lot of partners already. So you can subscribe to our data, it's all real time. So yes, you can unlock any business value you can using our APIs. So we'd love to talk more about it.
Question to you, sir. Yeah.
Yes, my name is Ken Burnett with Spatial Networks, and I have a question. Paul said that he didn't like to be annoyed with the advertising that he's getting. How do we pattern these individuals and these cell phones so that we're not annoying our potential customers with these advertisements?
Yes, so I think in the specific case, the Vivo Quint is not about pushing the advertisement. So I think push is where your issue is. So it's only when you actually open a specific app that you're subscribed to and you're opening at your convenience for your need, that's when a relevant advertisement comes to you. So that's the focus. So it's not about pushing the things which we see. Normally there are applications which push the apps. I'm actually not talking about that. I'm talking about when you use the application, when you need to use it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Wisdom from Ghana. I've been listening carefully, and I think there is one component of it that we are missing. Countries are now implementing laws in terms of data protection and all that, kind of to safeguard their data within their own countries. So I want to find out what are some of the privacy issues that they face. Should in case maybe my data is out there or my information is out there without me knowing. So what are some of the, and maybe in future, you should consider bringing maybe a legal person who can explain some of these issues to a normal person for us to best understand what sometimes we share out there.
Sure. As a consumer, privacy is a very big issue, and I would say that should be the prime player in times to come on deciding regulation around it.
Yep.
Cisco, the big networker, I think should take that question.
Sure. Great question there, and I think the jury is still out. There's a whole lot of dialogue and debate happening globally on this issue of consumer privacy. I think what's actually emerging as a comfortable working model is the fact that, if the data is actually aggregated and, presented for the purpose of development, I think it's perfectly all right and everybody is agreeable to it. As long as actually, we really don't triangulate the data to specific people, I think, we are okay with the data privacy. Having said that, I think it's actually, it's evolving. We will see a lot of movement in that area. There is actually, very healthy debates happening all over, and it's also actually, being picked up at the, WEF and, forums like that. This is something that is actually getting addressed, but we'll see more about it later on. I'm not here to actually, give a solution or actually a worldly opinion on that, but I can tell you one thing. Technologically, it is possible for you, and you should ask those questions wherever it is relevant to you. Is it possible to mask specific data pertaining to people? That's definitely possible technologically. As long as you're grossing up the data, I think it's actually useful. But specific privacy issues still remain.
Well, I think the Supreme Court will address that very squarely in the next couple of weeks. We will know. Yeah. This is the last but one question, sir. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. I am P.S. Reddy. I have a question for the smart cities data developments. What you're doing. When I see the present existing cities, there are a lot of plans with respect to environmental operational systems, like, sewage treatment plants on the liquid sides, effluent treatment plants, solid waste treatment plants, and all that. So the existing technology and the automation part of it is showing all the data in the right direction, but still a lot of environmental badness is happening. So how, in your smart city system, the data to be absorbed by yourself, not from the automation of the existing plants, from your end, how you're going to take up the issue, and it can be reflected to the real authorities.
20 seconds. The big problem, I think you'll have to discuss it offline, but I give you 20 seconds.
Okay. So, great question. I think what I would actually say here is that today, being aware of the problem, the layers of technology that are there today are actually about awareness, knowing what really the problem is all about. Majority of the things that you actually talked about, smart grids, which are distributing electricity or water or solid waste management, all of these things actually today we are not aware, and that's precisely the reason why there isn't actually a very efficient way of managing things. But the systems that are there actually acquire legacy data, overlay a layer of sensor and GIS to actually know what's the real-time analytics, if you will, or the real state of the matter. If you're able to overlay both of that, you'll know what is actually happening, and therefore you'll be able to implement the corrective action in place. It's happening, and I would like to talk more about it, offline.
The last question to the lady there, please. Sir, can we discuss it later, if you don't mind?
I'll come to you, Mr. Reddy.
Quick, ma'am. A short, quick question.
So with the cities getting smarter, even the criminals are getting more smarter day by day. So my question is, how can we safeguard location sharing from infringement and prevent crimes from happening?
So I can take it actually.
Very quickly.
So basically, when we work on the advertisement space, you actually follow the specific guidelines. You don't have the phone number of people, you use the device ID. Device ID is refreshable by the user at his wish. So there are a whole sort of regulations in place to control that information, and whoever is playing the space, they don't share information to anyone. So it's like the criminals don't have access to this database. You want to take it?
I think we...
Yeah. Just wanted to be just one point is that the responsibility starts with us. Technology can support, but we need to be aware of what we want to share with the global world. In this age where we are actually pretty happy about sharing everything, we need to be actually a little cognizant of what we want to share and how much we would like to actually share. So I think the responsibility is actually with us as well, as much as it is with the technology aspects.
Thanks a lot for being a patient audience. Lovely interacting with you. On my personal note, there was one point which remained unaddressed, which is to do, because all location today is dealt using satellites. And that, to me, is highly monopolistic at present. If you see, most people depend on GPS, which is an American-controlled system. There are just 2 more systems in the world on satellite-based location which are active and functional. For many in the audience who are from the West may not know, India has a full-fledged navigation system up and running called Navik. Less than 20-meter accuracy, largely meant for our armed forces, but some miserly users like me could also use it. The other system is the Russian one, but who controls access to this data? Can it be denied at some point? India has been denied GPS data at various points, which is why after the war in Kargil, India decided to have its own regional navigation system. Will GPS data ever get priced? If it gets priced, then a lot of stuff you do would be out of the reach of consumers, and it would get concentrated into the hands of a few people, which is why you see India, Japan, China. China has the BEDO system, and Russia, and the European Union. Americans and Europeans are great friends. What are navigation systems, they don't trust each other. Each has their own system. And India has its own, so does China. On that note, I would say the session was enriching, I hope, for you, and all of you would go back with ways of learning how to have more revenue in your pockets through this location-based analytics and the intelligence which was provided by the 4 speakers who have great experience in this area. Thanks a lot, participants. Thanks a lot, GIS Information System. And everybody awaits the arrival of Hardeep Puri, who's a great speaker and a former ambassador to India at the United Nations, and somebody who heads our Urban Affairs Ministry and the Smart City concepts. Yes. Thanks a lot. It's been great being with you.
Very good afternoon. I have the pleasure to announce that the Honorable Minister Hardeep Singh Puri ji has arrived and he is with us. I would like to invite Honorable Minister on the stage, please. I would like to invite Honorable Minister on the stage, and Dr. Narayanan, if you can just join him on the stage. It's a great pleasure. I got a chance to interact with Honorable Minister for 10 minutes just now. Really, I must say that amount of interest as well as dedication he has to build our cities, our urban infrastructure for making ease of life for citizens is commendable. And in this context, when we talk to him that we would like to do an address to this conference, which is a conference of geospatial professionals from the world, he very readily agreed to join us, of course to deliver his message, but also to explore a little more about the value and utility of geospatial technology while pursuing his ministerial objectives and the responsibilities. Dr. Hardeep Singh Puri has been an Indian Foreign Service officer. He has traveled worldwide as the envoy of India and has contributed to several international multilateral initiatives like GATT, WTO. He was the president of the United Nations Security Council in August 2011 till November 2012, and chairman of the United Nations Security Council Counter-Terrorism Committee as well. And for Stephen Swinefest, who is around, I believe so, it's all important that he was a part of the discussions of the Sustainable Development Goals and leading India into that process. He has been was appointed as the president of the governing board and chairman of the Governing Council of Research and Information Systems for Developing Countries. And he has also been visiting faculty of the Graduate Institute in Geneva. He brings tremendous amount of experience, knowledge, and collaboration with him. And I'm so happy that our Honorable Prime Minister handpicked him to be the minister in this department, which is Urban Affairs and Housing. And as we all know, half of the population is moving towards cities. How much of responsibility we as a community have to serve this industry. In this background, sir, without taking much of your time, I would like to request you to address this audience.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. Dr. Narayanan, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of full disclosure, let me start by saying, with all humility, that I come from a different world. I spent more than 4 decades in the world of foreign and security policy, with a little bit of trade policy thrown in. So it was not entirely anticipated, I would say, that when on 3rd September I was sworn in as a member of the Council of Ministers and allocated the portfolio of Housing and Urban Affairs, I was, of course, humbled, deeply gratified, because this is a ministry, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, where the Prime Minister's 3 flagship programs, Swachh Bharat Mission, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, or affordable housing, which plans to give every Indian a house of his own or her own by 2022, and the Smart Cities program is anchored. Cities, as you all know, have been the supreme manifestation of human civilization and continue to be the source of mankind's greatest endeavors and achievements. But when we talk of cities, there is, I think, a qualitative difference between what we confront as a challenge in the Indian context and the discussion and challenges of cities as they are seen elsewhere. Let me try and give you a small perspective. When we became an independent country in 1947, 17% of India lived in urban spaces. But mind you, that was 17% of a population base of only 300 million. The city of Delhi, India's capital, had less than 800,000 people living in it. The last estimate I have, which I would call reliable, about the city of Delhi, and I'm talking only about the city of Delhi, has something like 19 million. By 2030, we will have 600 million people living in India's cities. And no matter which way you look at it, the India of 2030, 70% of that remains to be built. And that brings me to where you, ladies and gentlemen, come in. In recent decades, cities have, in a sense, been blown apart, as it were, through the technologies that reveal their inner workings in ways that were unimaginable in my childhood or the childhood of this great nation. Today, information and communication technology, combined with mapping and imaging technology, have delivered the powers of an astronaut into the hands of a school child. Geospatial technologies are at the heart of this revolution, and this has brought the globe into our palms, allowing us to see different aspects of it simultaneously and to examine it in the minutest detail. I am happy to be with you in your midst this afternoon because I believe you are the stakeholders and a key part of the advanced ecosystem that we need in the urban sector. The urban sector we strive for is one that can deliver the promise of rapid economic growth and improved quality of life for all our citizens. It is essential that we understand what is at stake. This process is not something that started suddenly. It is also not a process that has a finite end. It has many quantum jumps built into the process itself. Your technologies allow us to visualize two essential aspects of cities. First, the agglomeration of people, places, and functions that create a city. This agglomeration requires, as it were, a God's eye perspective of the city so that our city administrators and planners can understand it better. Today, every government office is using Google Earth as if it is an indispensable tool. Secondly, we need to be able to analyze the perspective so that we can discern the economies of scale that the city offers. We can see how certain locations offer us opportunities for greater investment of resources and better outcomes. In this way, we are able to see everything together as well as individual elements within the whole. This is a unique opportunity afforded by your technologies. I referred a moment ago to the unique challenges that we confront in India. Last evening, I was participating in a panel discussion on cities and the kind of role cities will play in the current era in terms of international affairs. And the other panelist was the Premier of Victoria in Australia. And there are some commonalities. Clearly, Melbourne is a city which is growing at a fast pace, but Melbourne probably is still only 5.4 million. Equally, we have other cities which are doing well, but if you look at the scale of what we confront in India as a overall challenge, let me give you my personal experience. I referred in a moment ago to the problems of Delhi. And as I said, by the last estimate, which I call reliable, it should have 19 million people. But I'm only referring to the city of Delhi and its immediate environment. Delhi is also part of what is called the National Capital Region, which includes parts of the states of Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Rajasthan. If you take that together, that takes you well beyond a figure of in the 20s of million. Now, when you are looking at resource allocation, when you are looking at the construction of infrastructure in terms of setting up, let's say, new townships, or you are looking at issues relating to decongestion, I cannot see any way that this can be done without effective and whole-scale use of geospatial technologies. Because that is, as I was speaking to Sanjay, who's done pioneering work in bringing all this to all of you here together, you need to be able to know what's happening below ground, above ground, and you must get that in real time, on a real-time basis. As a student of history, I've spent a lifetime trying to study maps. Sometimes you don't know who made the map, who printed it, what era it belongs to. But you know, that's no longer the case. Satellite imagery today and geospatial technology will tell you exactly when unauthorized colonization took place, what the picture was in 1980, what it was in 1990, and you can easily go and do what is called a cross-checking of revenue records and ground truthing. I mean, I'm just giving one example which comes to mind from the point of view of a practitioner like me. Coming back to the use of geospatial technologies and what we are involved in, I think we need to view cities to be seen as integrated wholes, as holistic phenomena, where the silos between different sectors like housing, transportation, water supply, sewerage, etc., need to be erased so that we can consider them all together as parts of the integrated phenomena called the city. I will give you an example of how we are making creative use of geospatial technology in my ministry. We are running a solutions exchange portal called SmartNet. On SmartNet, you can find a map, and on that map, you will find geotagged projects being executed under the Smart City mission. We are doing the same with all our other missions and programs. On the Swachh Bharat portal, that is the Clean India portal, you will find every toilet marked. This creates greater transparency in government functioning, allows all of us, governments as well as citizens, to see what is being done for the public good. And it gives us a chance to converge our efforts to make every project a success. This brings me to another essential aspect of applying geospatial technologies in the urban sector. My ministry is promoting and championing convergence between all departments and agencies that are concerned with our cities. And believe me, there are many. There's a multiplicity of layers sometimes which does not work towards the efficient execution of projects. On the one hand, this convergence extends to the principle of Team India that has been enunciated by our Prime Minister. On the other hand, in a more technical sense, the convergence is about a process of development that builds greater coordination between stakeholders. We must leave behind us the days when multiplicity of agencies was a crippling reality. That's what I referred to in a minute, where every piper played his own tune and every department would be in conflict with the other. Today, we need convergence between stakeholders, and the stakeholders are not just in government. We need convergence between stakeholders outside government as well, because they are the real beneficiaries of and users of what the city has to offer in terms of ease of living. And what is interesting is that geospatial technology becomes an important instrument to build this convergence, because cities are fundamentally spatial in nature. This space and location allow us to visualize the points of convergence. I want to mention another key aspect of where we are headed with our thinking on cities. Today, I believe the city cannot be seen in isolation from the countryside or hinterland, or whatever old notions that we had about the context of cities. We are promoting a regional understanding of the city because cities do not have finite boundaries and do not have walls that restrict their spatial expanse. The city and the region are spatial continuums. We are also keen to see them as continuums in an economic sense, because the economy of the city is intrinsically linked with the economy of the countryside. There is a deep-rooted an integrated urban-rural nexus. If we have to plan for our capital urban economy, where there is greater symbiosis between the city and the village, we must use maps and analyses of our resource footprints as well as flows of labor and capital. The use of geospatial technology is therefore an essential element of the urban transformation that my ministry is promoting with all the states and union territories. This urban transformation requires cities to use your technologies to create e-governance platforms that allow our municipalities to get a holistic picture of what they are dealing with. A unified geospatial platform helps the city manager to construct a common operational picture and to treat his/her city as an enterprise so that he or she has the power that was reserved only for the gods earlier, the power to see and visualize, the power to detect and locate, the power to assess and judge, and finally, the power to resort and act. This makes the task of managing cities more efficient and allows the city manager to eliminate redundancy and optimize resource consumption. Today, our smart cities are going to have command and control centers for their transportation systems and their public surveillance systems. Tomorrow, they will be monitoring the consumption of energy in every building, and thereafter, we can expect that each citizen will also be able to visualize their own contribution to the economy of the city. This kind of interconnectedness, the sense of being part of a whole and yet distinct, this is uniquely possible through geospatial technology. Since all our citizens are already using this to book cabs, to buy food, to locate services and demarcate lands, I'm sure they will soon be in an urban world where everything has been geospatially marked. This will allow us to plan better, to spend money better, and to deliver services better. I'm grateful to all of you for making that happen and for bearing with me this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. What a phenomenal address. Very crisp, powerful, and very, very relevant, where you touched upon the need for understanding in real-time position of under and above infrastructure. Convergence of systems, that's what is all about smart cities, that you have to converge the systems. And also looking at delivering the government services to the citizens through geospatial-enabled platforms, which could be a unified platform. And I'll take just one more minute, sir, as per our discussions a few minutes earlier. Some of you would recognize and probably remember who joined us in this event in 2011 on 9th of February when Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed this gathering. And I think Dr. Shailesh Nayak is sitting here, who was with him at that time on the stage. When he offered to set up a geospatial technology park, and I was just sharing this thought with the minister, and minister was very excited with this. And what could be a leading, as I would request you, sir, to consider upon to, amongst all your smart city initiatives which you are taking, maybe one smart city which you can identify where you believe that it could be a geospatial hub with a technology park, with the industrial systems, and as well a university of world class which could fuel the global demand, or which could provide a leadership to the world market in this industry, and focus on infrastructure and city governance kind of applications. So with this, I would like to request my colleague, we want to present a small memento to the minister. With this, I would like to conclude the session and we'll keep you updated with our discussions, and you enjoy your lunch, and we'll join here back at 2:30.